another survey to families of our K-3 students, I believe is where we landed in the next day or yeah, either probably tomorrow morning, that survey will be going out. And we'll be asking parents yet again, of our K-3 families, are you prepared and ready to want to come back in? And there'll be some information you're about to hear about what you could expect in that as well, because we know that's an important part of it. But just some other examples, we have to reroute our bus system. And then once we create the new routes, our transportation department has to go through the bidding process of who's going to drive those routes. So there is just, again, I don't want to give the impression that this is easy to do. However, I will say I've been so proud of my team. They have worked the longest hours I've ever seen folks work. They are committed to making this happen. But I just want to be clear that it's a challenge. Having said that, I would like us to hear an update from Dr. Bailey, because I know her and her team have just been steeped in all of the staffing and the decisions that need to be made in order to bring back approximately, well, it was about 195 special needs students, and across the spectrum from preschool to our transition 18 to 21-year-old students as well. And I know I see Dr. Bailey, her camera just lit up, and I know it's been a challenge. We were texting with each other 24 hours ago, and here we are again, Dr. Bailey. So if you could just kind of share with us where we're at as we approach that critical step next week of working to bring back some of those students that I feel strongly we really could need to serve in person as much as possible. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Dr. Bailey.
Sure. Thank you very much, everyone. I do like going first sometimes. That's kind of nice. As most of you know, we have been in preparation to open schools for some groups of students, so I'll give you my update. In preparation to open schools next week for students served in our ECE or Early Childhood Education Program, the LRC2 programs, kindergarten through 12th grade, and the ACT program for students who are transitioning to adulthood, we have identified the remote teachers for every level. We have one teacher at every level, and we have two teachers at the elementary level. These teachers have been informed who their full remote students are, and those messages are going out to parents probably today or early tomorrow. The percentage of families who have elected to remain full remote is generally around 30% at each level, which is quite a bit higher than our initial survey, which was about 10%. This created some scheduling struggles because as families changed their mind or made their firm commitment, we had to adapt. As you may remember, we are moving 2 of our preschool classrooms to the old admin building. We call it Holly Street. And as always, when we're getting ready to open new buildings, it's a sprint to the finish. And our special services director, Dr. Stephanie King, and the teams from new construction have been working there tirelessly to get us ready. Yesterday, I learned that they have determined the fencing plan for an outside play area, and we have furniture being moved in and things being adjusted so that our 2 ECE classrooms slated for Holly Street are ready to go. I also had some good help with the transportation department talking about where that bus loop is going to go, since we haven't had buses in that parking lot before. We have been planning to put the pieces in place to have in-person services starting on Tuesday for secondary students. Those would be the ACT students, the high school students, and the middle school students served in LRC2. And elementary, LRC2, and ECE will be starting on Thursday. As a team, everyone affected by that change, we had probably 110 people in the meeting. We had a day-long planning meeting on Monday of this week, and all the teams have 2 days coming up to be in their classrooms to transition to in-person learning. To this end, I know that teams have been swapping out tables for desks so students can have their own discrete space, putting blue tape on the floor to decide where your cohorts are and are to be. They have been working with, HR has been working with the staff to confirm their availability to return to work in person and making sure that we can deliver FAPE safely. The health and well-being of our students, our family, and our staff are continually on my mind, and this is really hard work. But pulling together, we are making positive strides to the goal. I have been in contact with the Lake Washington School District Executive Director of Special Services, and she's shared with me the places that perhaps maybe she didn't give enough attention to, so we can plug that hole before we get started. I've been really grateful for her feedback so that we can be as ready as possible. For students and families who are not in this first group returning to in-person learning, these families have sometimes been engaging in the IEP process to seek a team decision about their necessity to deliver some special education services in person to individual students. These IEP meetings have just begun, and I expect that process to continue in the weeks to come. Our special services goal continues to be the same that I shared a few weeks ago: deliver specially designed instruction safely. There are many moving pieces, and we are moving at full speed. I would not be able to tell you that school is starting next week for some students without my fellow directors, the special education team, everyone being flexible, and absolutely everyone I have called, texted, bribed, or emails with requests in the last 2 weeks. It's been a true team effort. I'm excited to get started, and I'm happy to answer questions if anyone has any.
Okay, so do you have any further report out, Superintendent?
I do. I was just waiting. I think there's a question from Director Gallinger.
Okay.
Dr. Bailey, I really appreciate all the work that you're doing on behalf of our students and families. Can you give any comments, since you were working with Lake Washington, to give their perspective on how it's gone since they started a few weeks ahead of us? I mean, things that we could have learned and things that they say the way they wish they would have known. And now 2 weeks in, are there more families that are engaged from Lake Washington or not?
So I don't know about the engagement, and I don't know what their baseline was, but the bits of advice she gave me were they underestimated how quickly they would go through the PPE that was new to the staff. So the wearing of gowns was a new technique for staff, and they had some operator errors in tearing them or using them incorrectly. And once they got everybody comfortable with how it goes, it settled right down. The other thing she cautioned me about was to have our isolations rooms ready the very first day, and not because any students came with COVID, but they were so excited that some of them had tummy troubles on the very first day. And so there was very ordinary cleanups to be done. But she said it was a little bit of a surprise that they had kids who were either so excited or whatever, got sick at school and were throwing up in class, and it created just a really big surprise. So other than that, my plans were lined up just what she suggested. And she said that the end of the first week was everyone was really exhausted. But by the end of the second week, many of the teachers were reporting they're just so happy to see their kids in person, just so happy to be doing something that they know how to do and have done before. The Lake Washington schools are also doing the half day. So Issaquah School District teachers who are coming back to work will have their own group of kids in the morning remotely and then in person in the afternoon. Or if they're a school that has two, they might have their own students in person in the morning, and then the kids go home on the bus, and then everyone comes back to a live class on the video later in the day. So that part was really important to me, that the students and teachers remain their group. So they still have their community. So the teachers are teaching the same children in person and remotely. It just switches midday.
That's great. And then can you comment, I know we had a lot of catch up to do with the finishing evaluations or doing the reevaluations because of the timing. And I know you had told us earlier you're going to try and get a whole big number of them in this first month.
We are on. Yes, I am so, and this is not work I've been doing. This is work led by Shreen Carver and the school psychologist and the building teams, but we are on target to be in compliance with everyone by our drop dead date. So I gave the teams until October 16th to have all the team in the building work done, and everyone reports that they are well on their way to meet that goal. That gives the district office staff 2 weeks to get everything in the books, buttoned up correct and dialed in perfectly, so that Mr. Jake Cooper can see all those numbers he wants to see. Because we have income, we get money for students whose documents are in order, and we're going to make it. And it was a very big number. So that's a very big lift in the middle of bringing everybody back to school.
Thank you for that.
That's great. Thank you, Dana, and huge thank you to your staff. I know how hard you've all been working and how deeply you care about this. So I just can't say enough for the work you're all doing. I would share one comment that was shared with me from the superintendent in Lake Washington, Dr. Holman, related to this very issue. And at that time, I'm not sure what their numbers are now. They had about 400 students coming in for various services. Similar to what Dana just said, initially some anxiousness and things like that for sure in how to manage this kind of hybrid of learning. The anxiousness kind of started to subside, and the excitement of getting to be with the students was growing. And that was just a comment that he had made to me, and it was one that I thought that I hope that's the outcome that we experience as well. So just a big thanks to all of you. We're excited about next week. And again, I know it's, there'll be some hiccups and some problems, but I think just the commitment to moving forward and serving these students in a manner that we know will be good for them, it just is really important. And I'm very grateful to all of you for the work you're doing there. President Moraldo, the other thing that I know that there's a lot of interest in is the planning for the return to K-1 students as well. And so for that, I'd asked Assistant Superintendent Bongard to kind of share our plans. Now this is a little different in that we haven't firmed it up. We don't have a memorandum of understanding with the Issaquah Education Association. We've been having lots of talks, and we have lots of talks planned. And fortunately, we have a little bit of time as well to work through this. It's a little more complicated because we're talking more closer to probably about 3,000 students that we have in those two grade levels. Not that they'll all return, but so there's just a lot more logistics that are having to be worked out there as well. I'm excited by the prospects and the work that's happening. And so Assistant Superintendent Bongard, if you could kind of share where our planning process is now and what parents might be able to expect in a few weeks when this eventual return of students K-1 happens.
Great, I'd love to do that, Superintendent Thiele. Before I jump in, I just wanted to remind everyone that in addition to our some of our special services programs that will be starting next week, we also have our ECAP preschool that will resume in person on October 1st as well. As Superintendent Thiele said, we October 15th, and we're planning on a hybrid schedule, an A-B schedule, half day, 4 days per week in person. So we would have a cohort A and a cohort B, a morning session, and then an afternoon session. And as we were planning the schedule, as you know, school board members, there are a lot of compliance issues in trying to build a schedule, and we're looking at the required 1,665 instructional minutes per week. We're looking at our CBAs, or collective bargaining agreements, to make sure that we're in compliance with our current contracts and teacher days, work days. And so the schedule that we've put together, our draft schedule, because as Superintendent Thiele shared, we're still having conversations with our teacher leaders and our IEA leadership. But it is in compliance with state requirements and, like I said, our CBAs. I'm really pleased with what we're planning. I feel I feel very strongly, and have shared repeatedly with Superintendent Thiele. I think bringing our students back, particularly our 5- and 6-year-olds, our kindergarten and first graders, in a half day when we have these students who haven't been in school, for example, our first grade students for the past 6 months, and our kindergarten students, in some cases, not at all. This will be their first experience. To be able to transition them back in small cohorts. Our largest classroom at kindergarten, for example, is 18. So if everybody came back, you would have groups of approximately 9. Now that could shift a little bit depending on how transportation works out. But my point being that we'll have really small cohorts. And so to be able to bring students back and keep our protocols in place for social distancing, helping kids transition to wearing masks for a number of hours every day, because right now at home, they're not having to wear masks or go through the routines of a school day. I really think developmentally that this will serve our students really well. And I think the time that they do have in person then, the instructional time, we can really focus on, once we get those routines down, on really focusing on our reading and our writing and math with integration with social studies and science. The goal is, we've seen a lot of information on social media, so I want to be really clear. Our goal is to keep our classrooms intact. Now, having said that, dependent on a variety of factors, as the survey goes out and we get information back on the number of families who choose to remain with remote, which would be with our Issaquah teachers, as well as the current classroom teachers. It also will be dependent on the number of staff that we have returning. And because they also have options if they're in certain high-risk categories to look at leave, for example. It's highly dependent on our paraprofessionals. We rely on our paraprofessionals for small group, for supervision, for supporting getting our students in and out of the buildings in the morning and dismissal in the afternoon. And in particular, as we bring them back during this time, we have to go through the attestations and we'll have to do our temperature checks in the morning. That all takes a lot of human resources as well. So a lot of factors will play into what it finally looks like, but we are committed to trying as much as possible, keeping our classrooms intact. We have been in the process of having folks from our capital projects teams out in the buildings, measuring, letting us know firm numbers of how many students and arrangements of desks to be able to support the social distancing required. And we're well within with the number of our cohort size. Like I said, our largest kindergarten class is 18, our largest first grade class is 21. Our classroom capacity can absolutely support that. In a number of our schools, when we went in and physically measured the 6-foot distance between desks, we could get 12 to 14 in some of our plans, layouts of our schools. And then in our newer schools, we actually were able to get 18 desks in there and maintain the 6-foot distance required. So we're confident that with the smaller cohorts, that we'll be able to do that with our K1 in our K1 classrooms. We continue to work with, like I said, our teachers union, continuing to engage in conversations. We've been engaging in conversations with our principals with preliminary plans so that they can start some planning already on what that will look like, starting to think of their protocols for having students enter the building, what dismissal will look like, starting to plan some schedules around recess, what recess will look like with social distancing and all of the pieces that go with that. I think the current schedule we're looking at allows about an hour during the day between the cohorts so we can get in, and we've been working with our maintenance and operations, making sure that that's enough time to go in and get those classrooms cleaned in between cohorts. And they've assured me that we will be able to do that, to accomplish that. And I am really confident in the work of all of the teams that I've been working with, from maintenance to our building administrators, to administrators at central office that have been partnering with me on this, that while it's an aggressive timeline, if all the factors fall into place, I think we can do this and do it well in a way that'll serve our students well and make that in-person time a really quality learning experience. Questions? And I want to add that I think our experience we had at summer school also was, I think we were one of the only districts that actually did carry out a summer school opportunity for our students. But that gave us an opportunity to really see how the protocols that we had designed and put in place, what that looked like. And that was invaluable to help us, I think, in our thinking as we move into bringing back K-1 across the district.
Suzanne.
Sorry. I'm just still a little bit confused on how the hybrid schedule works. And maybe because you don't have an MOU yet, you don't totally have the answer. But if I'm a teacher, I've come back. So I have 9 of my kiddos in the morning, and then they go home, and I have my other 9 kiddos in the afternoon. What are the first kiddos doing when they go home? Are they self-directed? Is somebody else remote teaching them? That's the part I don't quite understand.
Yeah, so in our thinking, our best thinking right now is that students would still, in their schedule, have some independent learning time. And so they might start a piece of writing in the morning, and then in the afternoon when they're home, they would be continuing that writing. The teacher might be posting, for example, they might have gone through a lesson in math, had the opportunity to do some practice problems together, kind of that gradual release model. And then in the afternoon when they're home working independently, they'd be then finishing up working on some problems on their own, with the opportunity then the following morning to bring that back and talk, if there are concerns or issues, to go over those prior day's assignments with a teacher in person. The other piece that we've done is our current plan. And again, we have lots of conversations that still need to occur. But our current plan would put our specialist time in the part of the day where our students are working independently or remotely, so that they could access specialist time rather than during in person. They would access it when they're at home, along with their lunch break as well.
Okay, thank you. That makes more sense. Thank you.
Jody, could you touch a little bit on what Wednesday might look like?
Yeah, so on Wednesdays, thanks, Ron, on Wednesdays for reminding me of that. The plan currently calls for the whole staff to come back together as a group. And when we held our work groups, our elementary scheduling work group this summer, in many of the hybrid models we talked about, that was really important to the people who were members of that group, that we have an opportunity, if we're in small cohorts, to bring the whole class together at least once a week to maintain those relationships that have been formed. And so the current schedule calls for kids to come together remotely once a week. Hopefully we'd be able to, that's where we do our morning circles as a whole class, and then also our social emotional lessons as well. And then there'd be opportunities on those days for some small group, for check-ins, that kind of thing.
Harlan.
If you have responses from families such that you have cohorts of 10 to 12, do you need to do the AB hybrid of morning, afternoon?
Yeah, and that's a great question. So it depends. So like I said, many factors. It could be, although we're also having to look at how many teachers overall will return. And then we'll also need some teachers who teach remote classes. So I don't know that yet, if Director Gallinger, if that'll be an option until we have numbers, and we also have a clearer picture of staff numbers as well.
And then is there any way that in this era that we could mandate that kids get their flu shots before they come back into the buildings? Is that possible in this weird pandemic time? Because that would certainly help with any potential COVID-like symptoms, which are essentially like influenza symptoms.
Well, if somebody's in the medical field and that's a suggestion that they make to a higher level, that would be helpful. But I agree. I don't know that currently we can mandate that.
Could we have like a flu shot clinic at the same time? Maybe you could have some kindergarten bus ride practice, and you could have a flu shot clinic. Maybe you get like a Virginia Mason or Allegro to host a clinic at the same time, because I do hope that you have some ramped up things like how to ride a bus, because I think assigned seating and things like that will probably be different this year, but maybe we could coordinate with that, because I think getting the message out, that's one part of the public health approach, is about widespread influenza immunizations.
Yeah, and we actually had a conversation on Monday about the possibility of doing a opportunity for that, because it's very popular within our community, the bus ride. We know parents really appreciate that.
Massive wealth inequality.
I'll let you speak to that.
The epidemics of loneliness.
Because I know that that's really dependent upon your staff. I know is working hard right now, already putting preliminary routes together for this plan so that we can start looking at numbers. So Jake, you probably have a better idea of if realistically that we'll be able to do that.
I think given the schedule I had today, a ride along as we normally do, it's going to be pretty difficult to execute. I think the timeline we were looking at with our colleagues in the bus drivers union and my management team, we had the dry run of the routes like the day before, the 15th, and package selection that week prior. So not much, Dr. Gallinger, in the way of time for the mock bus ride. We actually talked about that as well. So, I mean, I can circle back with the team and see if we can squeeze it out. But it's pretty tough right now. We're in the routing stages. Well, everything's routed. We are now in the dividing the routes by our cohort stages. So we know that's almost a rite of passage, and one of the favorite, as Superintendent Thiele and Jody, Assistant Superintendent Baumgartner, that's one of the favorite things for kindergartners. So let me circle back and see if we can make that happen. But right now it's a pretty tight timeline. So I'm not telling you no, but I'm also telling you that we're pretty squeezed.
I wonder also if we can't, because of the tight timeline, and that's good. I mean, I put that out there for y'all to work towards, because bus riding, as Dr. Gallinger was saying, could look a lot different in the pandemic. We may even have to do some, like we go through routines in the classroom, we may have to just keep a bus park there, and that could almost be like an activity even once the school day and the school week starts, because I think that will be important. I want to encourage people to put their child on the bus. That's something we've always worked for. And I also wanted to just note the idea, I noted that Dr. Gallinger about combining a flu clinic in the school in some way, shape, or form as well. We certainly encourage people to get their flu shots, and we've done it for staff before, so we'll have to look into that. That's not something that we've done that I'm aware of in my tenure here with students and families, but flu shots have gotten so much more easy to acquire out. I mean, I've already gotten mine. I got it at my Safeway pharmacy. So that's something we definitely would want to look at, because as you said, so many symptoms are similar. And to COVID, it would be nice if we could head some of that off as well.
And we are planning to help support. We've talked with our principals about supporting staff with some visuals that they could do on that. If we do get to go on the 15th, all the transmission rates stay low and we continue on track. That day before, on that Wednesday, that staff could have some visuals about when you come in tomorrow, this is what it'll look like. Here's how you take your temperature. Here's, where you will line up. And maybe, Jake, if it's not possible to do it in person, it could be an option to have a virtual bus ride. And that could be part of what we give to our teachers to share about what the new first day of in-person school looks like.
Day number 2, as we call it.
Right. Yeah, because we've definitely talked about how do we kind of help students know what to expect prior to that first day.
We are planning to as we get closer and we have more details, we'll do another town hall presentation, and we'll try to drop that a week or so. I think we're tentatively looking at maybe October 6th. We'll see if that date holds up. But we know that once we've got more detail, we'll want to do a specific town hall presentation just on that, just on the return of in-person for our K-1 students as well. We didn't do that for our special needs students because it's a much smaller population and they've been communicating more directly with those families. So yeah, I do think it's important for everyone to understand that this won't be school as you remembered it back in March of 2019. It will look different. Thank you, Jody, for your explanation of the physical distancing and mask wearing, the temperature attestation, the temperature taking and attestation, and a lot of cleaning. Let's be clear, there'll be a lot of directing the students to hand sanitize. And in the beginning, those first few days, and so there will be a lot of procedural learning, how to do school in this new way. So it won't look exactly the same. Having said that, I think it's an important step. And I think those skills, much as I said a few weeks ago, the skills that our teachers and students have learned to work in the remote environment, a lot of those skills will have carryover going long beyond the pandemic. And I think a lot of what we'll be teaching our students too will be, flu virus mitigation is not a bad thing in any setting. It's particularly important, of course, when we have a pandemic. But, I've been reminded myself as an adult, the importance of hand washing and practicing these things, particularly during flu season. So it will look different, and I'm glad you touched on the SEL, the direct instruction of SEL on Wednesdays and so forth, Assistant Superintendent Bongard. But I think the fact of getting in school, being around other kids and staff will go a long way towards addressing social emotional needs of our students as well. And frankly, for some of our staff too, because I know they're anxious to see students and get to interact with students. I'll be quiet now so the board can ask their questions.
Well, I wanted to open up to public comment, but I did notice that Executive Director Mellish was here, and I didn't know if you wanted to add anything specific to teaching and learning during this time and during the restart of the school year.
Yeah, I think the only thing I would add is that I was pretty excited about the choice to go with the AM/PM. That I think it is going to be the easiest for us to keep those who are still doing remote learning and those who are doing in-person learning in sync, so that we have the maximum flexibility as we go forward, integrate more and more students as if the situation changes. I also think that it provides for the best opportunity for the best design of instruction over, say, 2-day week, full days. I think that the importance for young elementary students to get multiple lessons over multiple days in a week is critical. So I was really excited that that's where we landed with the schedule. Obviously I would love to have all the students in all the time, and we all would, but as we look at the various trade-offs, I feel very supportive of this schedule in terms of balancing the needs for the health measures to keep our students healthy with the instructional needs of our students. So there's work ahead for my team to make tweaks to the learning plans, but I think we can keep the general pace much the same. The pacing guides that we have started with, I think we can keep those going pretty close to as they are. So I'm excited about that.
Right.
And I'm really excited. I think our teachers can do some wonderful, wonderful things with those small numbers. To, like I say, to do some really in-depth instruction and give more care and attention to individual students as they're working in that time period due to the smaller class sizes in those cohorts.
Great. Before we go into public comment, I wanted to put a few links for the public in the chat. So I'm going to put about 3 different links. The first one that I'm putting in is to our Issaquah schools YouTube page. So I know that we are at the maximum number of participants. So if you drop off, you may not get back in, but I did want to provide that link for you now so that you can have it. If you do fall off, you can go. We are live streaming this now. You can also subscribe to our YouTube page, and you'll get updates as to when we post new things. There's a lot of great information on that site. The next thing I wanted to supply the public, because I know it's part of the conversation, is a link to the Department of Health decision tree. And if you've emailed me, you've seen this link recently, but this is the decision tree that is provided by the Washington State Department of Health. And the last page of that is a really good visual of how we can move into from online learning. That right there, if you can see Superintendent Thiele's screen. And that is really, it answers a lot of questions about what data are you using? How do you know that this is a good time? The last thing I wanted to supply, the last link that I will share with you, is a link to the public health of King County, of Seattle King County. They have a toolkit that our school district will be utilizing. In fact, I would like to thank Dr. Gallinger for his work in bringing the East Side school board members together, because I think we had a lot of input towards what that toolkit is, what data we needed as a school district, and much of that guidance is around what happens if we were to get a case. So I know that there's been a lot of questions around that, and that's the toolkit that will help guide us through returning to schools. So that being said, I will start. We have a long list of people who have raised their hands to speak. If you would like to speak during public comment time, you can go down to the bottom where it says participants. Click on that tiny up arrow to the right, and then, or excuse me, not that part. Just click on the participant screen. It will show the participants, and then from there you should be able to raise your hand. So I'm going to begin with Ramona Wine. Before I do, I will allow you to unmute your mic and turn on your screen. You will have, we're going to limit conversation or input to 2 minutes because there's so many of you, and we will limit our time to 1 hour aggregate time for input. So we will stop all public input at 7 o'clock. And Ms. Wine, I will let you go first. Let me see if I can unmute you. There you go.
Thank you so much, and thank you for holding this public forum. I'm Ramona Wine. My daughter goes to Pacific Cascade Middle School, and before then went to Sunset Elementary. I've always been impressed with the Issaquah School District for their care and concern, most specifically the in-staff, the teachers, the in-school staff have always really cared and have shown that. We don't want to talk about the spring because that was a problem. But once we started back and we started remote and we got our kids going, and the first 2 weeks were not easy. We didn't have our textbooks. We were all fiddling with Zoom. We've only specifically spoken about kindergarten and down, and we've got a lot of middle school, elementary, and high school up here that I want to talk about the plan. My biggest concern is that we're developing a routine. We all know the routines are very important for children. The anxiety of the what ifs are very difficult. So when we get an ambiguous email that says, hey, you might go back at some point, just watch this health department statistic, it's very difficult to explain that to a 7th grader. They're doing great now. I listened to it. If you have the same funding for remote school as you do for in-person. And through hearing the transportation concerns, through hearing the, oh, we're going to have a plan for these 3 things coming up. Oh, we're going to have that settled. We don't have it quite yet. That doesn't give me as much encouragement if we are moving folks in starting Monday for special education, that we even have a clue is what we're going to do with the middle and the high school. So I would just say, I'm really questioning and wondering why the rush, especially with the outstanding teachers that we have, the commitment.
2 minutes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I have Dorona Burkholder. And I think you can unmute yourself. There you go.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
I'm Dorana Burkholder, Issaquah Education Association President. And I'm here tonight to speak on behalf of my membership. I want to share with you that our educators are doing a great job with remote learning. And as that first parent said, they have gotten into a routine and have connected with their students, have connected with their families, and have built a community with their students. The idea of being in person is still a concern around health and safety issues, and there's still a lot to be addressed. There are a lot of questions that need to be answered around PPE and proper custodial support and cleaning of the buildings. And educators want to do what's best for their students and families, and that's provide the best education possible. I know that these abrupt changes like this don't make a situation any easier, and I agree, the fast timeline creates nervousness, anxiety among students, families, and staff. And what I want to do as a goal is to have the likelihood that we keep schools open and avoid having to return to distant learning, because we ended up opening in the right way. I will say that a lot of the information that's shared still needs to be bargained with the association, and we do have dates on the calendar for that. But all those agreements still need to come in place. We've already seen already that an aggressive timeline hasn't worked well for bargaining, and that must take place. It's a hard situation, and I understand that. But I think by slowing down and making sure we have our questions addressed will be better for families and students and staff. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I have Tiffany Henry. And Tiffany, and I don't know, Stephen, if you have access, there you go. Are you able to unmute your own? Okay, there. I think I sent you an unmute request. Thank you. We're doing a lot of things because last week we got bombed, so.
No worries. No. I completely understand, and let me fix things. There's a couple things that I've sort of been wondering about, a variety of issues. We've talked about flu shots. I know that there aren't currently free flu shots for staff. I'm curious about things like backup PPE for students that are currently attending, like if they sneeze in their mask. What do we do about that? Are we supposed to provide that as staff members, or will the school district provide that? If the numbers go up, are there going to be more in class, or are they getting redistributed? Like, how are those being handled as those numbers roll in? I do have a couple LRC2 kiddos. If they do choose to stay online, are they going to get a different teacher because they've been establishing routines with me and establishing that relationship with me? If they choose to stay online, is that going to disrupt their learning? How to balance hybrid and in person, quite frankly. As a teacher, I'm barely keeping up right now. I mean, I'm doing it, but kind of that same deal. I've been in a routine now for a little bit, I kind of got my rhythm down. And I'm not disrespecting any decision made by the board, but I'm concerned about my capacity to handle both hybrid and in-person learning simultaneously. That's a lot of planning, quite frankly. And I'm not sure how to handle that in a full day experience where I may or may not get that planning time in between. I'm sure that there's some discussions between the union and the school board and the school district regarding that, but that's a big concern for me. As far as specialist time with my LRC2 kiddos, I know that in the afternoon is the goal right now, but if that is their gen ed time, then they're not getting that. I mean, there's just sort of, this seems to be happening very quickly, to be frank with you. And I'm not sure if all of these sort of wild cards, so to speak, I'm sorry for using that phrase, but that's the phrase I have in my head right now. These sort of moving parts, if you will, have been considered completely. I know a lot of the things have been, oh, am I up?
Yeah.
Sorry. Thank you.
You can complete your thought.
Oh, I was going to say, I know a lot of the things in intermediate that we have been talking about is paper passing between students, and a concern whether or not we can bring laptops back to the classroom, because in intermediate grades and elementary, we will be using those quite a bit, and we won't have access to those. Those are currently out with students.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate your input. Okay, next I have Tony Hunter. And there you go. I've unmuted you.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. So I appreciate that there's going to be a choice for families, and I really like that that's going to happen. I agree that this is coming out really fast. From what I understand, that very shortly, families are going to have to make a choice through second semester for the in-person versus in-person versus fully remote. I could not make that decision today for my child. I want him to be able to stay with his teacher, and without knowing what his teacher is going to do, I don't know what we can do. I don't want to disrupt what's going on for him, the good placement that was placed for him. So I feel like we really need a lot more details as families to be able to make that decision, especially if it's going to last us more than 6 weeks or what have you. If we're being asked to commit for a good period of time, we need a lot more information before that decision can be made.
Thank you. Next, I have Elle Lecoq. And if you could state your full name since it doesn't appear.
Hi, my name is Lisa Lecoq, and I'm a first grade teacher at Maple Hills. And although I would love to be with my students in the building, I am concerned that this is being rushed too quickly. As Tony Hunter was saying, and Tiffany as well, and Dorona, we have a lot of unknowns, and it's creating a lot of anxiety for the teachers. And we have started setting up some really great routines, and we are building relationships with our students. I just would like to know why the rush of getting them there in October. Why couldn't we wait until, after the winter break, or even wait until after, 2 weeks after, winter break is over, just to kind of say that we've gotten through part of the big flu season. I'm just concerned that once we get there and somebody gets sick, then what happens? I'm really nervous about having to teach in the building and then also addressing remote issues as well. I work more hours now than I ever have when I was in the building. I do it because I love those kids, but I'm wiped out. And I am a parent with no kids at home. They're all grown. I know of teachers that have 1, 2, 3 kids at home that they're also trying to support. And I'm just wondering if that's being taken into consideration, the amount of time and energy that every teacher is putting into this. I'm just not convinced that that going in October is going to be the best for the students, especially the young ones that do need routine and a schedule. And we're building right now, and then it's going to be gone. So we need more information. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I have Tori Silvers. And I should have, there you go.
Thank
You're
you.
unmuted.
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thanks.
And we just lost you. Your internet's cooking out.
My name is Tori Silvers. I'm a 5th grade teacher. Can I turn my video off? Is that better?
Technically, you're not supposed to. The Open Public Meeting Act says that everybody needs to be able to see and hear you. So if it's not working, please know that you can send us an email with your input, and we will read that.
Okay, well, ugh.
I know.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So I'll go very quick and engaged to help my students and families in a more personal learning experience. I spent hours creating and planning and organizing an online classroom. I've developed my curriculum and lessons to fit students in my classroom. My students have taken a huge leap of faith. We told them that they could learn even on a computer. We're teaching in live settings, using questioning and having rich discussions.
Yeah, Tori, we're hearing you for about 20 seconds and then you're dropping
recording
off.
your lessons for. Okay. I don't know what to do. I just think that getting back to the classroom right now is devastating. It's
yeah. I think you probably have it written out, so please email it to us. And then I'm
devastating because it seems that the work.
And then I'm going to move on because we're not able to hear your input, and I want to make sure we get all of it. So please email that to us, and we will read that and take that into consideration. So thank you, Tori, for your input. Next, I have Dan Rosenstein.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Awesome.
So go ahead.
So a couple of things. So my kids go to IVE as well as Issaquah Middle. So remote learning has been working in our family. I realize that it's not the same for everybody, and I realize that it's an impossible problem for the school board and the administration to solve. The thing I would like to note is that my children, in a very short amount of time, built up self-time management and their own self-discipline and responsibility for making their times, their transitions, their classes, like moving between it, taking the right amount of time for brain breaks with very little intervention by my wife and I, which has worked really well. I feel like they're learning the right life skills because of that. In addition, the next thing I want to say is that it's interesting that the choice that was talked about just a second ago is being put on the families that are going to decide to go back to school and go into building are the ones that are going to have their teachers kept with them. And it's interesting that it's not the flip, that those that are being more cautious and want to get, want to ensure that their kids are kept safe are the ones that get the teachers that they've been building structure and relationship with. I do have a few questions. The first one is the bus discussion that's been happening with busing happening. I want to know who's going to enforce masks on the bus. The reality is, after being in the district for a number of years, we know that kids can't even be kept seated on the bus without the bus driver having to say something and pay attention 24/7 while they're driving the bus. Okay, so that's been a problem. So I'm wondering how masks are going to be enforced. The second one is, in the building, will students be required to wear the masks, or will they be asked to wear the masks? And if they are required, will this be disciplined and enforced? Are students going to be allowed to make the choice of wearing a mask in the building? In addition, look, some parents are working, other parents aren't. There's a disruption no matter what happens. Right now, the disruption that's happening is a micro disruption where the student might come in, might ask me a question, might need help, etc. I can work, I can take a pause, I can go. It's different for everybody.
2 minutes.
The disruption that's going to happen with the busing and having to leave and come back is going to be a much more significant disruption for parents that are already managing this. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next, I have Bethany White.
Can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Thanks. This is Bethany White. I am a teacher at Discovery Elementary. And if this is only for comments, then I'll cede my time to someone else. Okay, so it's not a question that I can ask for clarification?
No, not at this time.
Okay, then I'll pass. Sorry.
That's okay, but feel free to email your questions either to ourselves or to staff members.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next I have Christine Richmond. Now you get to speak. Oh, not unless I unmute you. Now you get to speak.
Yay. Okay. So I've just got a quick statement. I'm just going to read it. So my name is Chrissy Richmond. I work at Issaquah High School in the health room, and I'm the paraprofessional SEIU 925 chapter president. And so here we go. So on behalf of the paraprofessionals of SEIU 925 in the district, I want to say thank you for your commitment to our paras and finding a place for us in the remote learning model. We have had positive bargaining sessions with the district and have made strong progress together. However, we have significant concerns for our youngest students returning en masse in the middle of October. There are just too many unanswered questions about safety. We cannot rush these plans and put our students at risk. We urge the district to slow down and be diligent about how we approach this next phase in learning. We believe we can accomplish this together, especially if the district remains committed to retaining our staff, from paras to teachers to office personnel. We are excited to welcome our students back to our buildings, but only when we know we can protect them and ourselves from this deadly virus. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next I have S. Bash. So if you can give your full name, since it's not displayed in your S. Bash. Okay, last call for S. Bash. There you go.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, my name is Ryan Lindeman, and my student is at Issaquah Valley Elementary. He's a kindergartner. And like every other person I've actually seen that has actually spoken before me, I'm deeply concerned by your timeline. And looking at this, I see many flaws. I see many interpretations of various things. I see no parent input. I'm looking at the fact that you guys have wanted to bring people back to school in the middle of a pandemic, and you have an A/B, but our kids have a routine currently. They've been doing distance learning. Some of us have made sacrifices within our profession in order to get our kids back to school and do this remotely. We've put in technology, we've put in time, we've put in loss to our families. I actually am also the son of a public health nurse. I'm also the brother of a teacher. And in looking at your plan, I see nothing but rushing and brown numbers. I love the teachers that we have right now. My son loves his teacher. I love the community here in Issaquah. But again, like everybody before me, I cannot understand this rush timeline. It does not seem to make sense. We did a survey. Why didn't we take a survey of all the parents prior to saying you're going to announce you're going to do this? What about budget constraints? Can we afford to actually have in-person and remote learning? Teacher changes. That's not consistent. That's not going to work for a lot of different children, especially when my kid's already psyched up about his kindergarten class. I mean, who's going to tell one of these students when one of their teachers gets the disease or gets the virus and possibly passes away? Because we've taken this extreme risk. It just seems poorly thought out. The dates seem like brown numbers. I work in product development and engineering, and I don't see any planning. I don't see anything you've sent me that is concrete, that is going to tell me how you're going to take care of my kid. And the other thing, have you ever tried to get a kindergartner to wear PPE? It doesn't really work.
Okay, 2 minutes.
Anyways, thank you. I love the teachers. I hope the board does the right thing.
Great. Thank you. Next, I have Marina Sabaya. Marina? Okay, I'm sending the unmute. And I do apologize if I keep cutting people off, but there is a long list of you and I'm not going to make it through unless I say 2 minutes. So sorry about that.
Hi, I am Marina Subaya. I'm a mom of a second grader at Maple Hills Elementary. I would actually like to voice my support and appreciation for the announcement and actions of the board. I was impressed at the proactive reaction to starting to work through the decision tree once our numbers fell in the appropriate range. I am an outpatient registered nurse and my children have been in childcare since March. My second grader, then first grader, has been in the BASC program, which has been excellent. I'm currently still in the BASC program, so paying $900 a month for public education. And I'm thrilled that we are trying to get back into the classroom. We all want details. We all want more information. I understand it's a work in progress, but I think it's the right goal to strive for. I would ask that the board maybe reconsider or take a look at their communication strategy, because information is what decreases anxiety and builds trust, and we need both right now. Also, I would love to see a robust support program. Apologize, that's a car. I would love to see a robust support program put into place for teachers. I would love to see an open forum where essential workers can be paired with teachers and staff to not debate policy, but to discuss our fears, discuss our anxieties, discuss our coping mechanisms, and the joys and the positives that has come from people who have worked in person throughout this pandemic. We have an amazing community full of essential workers, and I would love to bring the BASC professionals together with the teachers to help support this transition. I trust that the district will rely on the data and will make adjustments as needed. It's obviously a moving target, but I think it's, I would like to voice support, and I do know it might not be expressed here right now. There is support in the community significantly to try to bring our most vulnerable back, for which distance learning does not work well. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I have Stan and Rosalind Osagawa, and I don't know which one of you is here, so if you could please specify your name.
Hello, my name is Rosalind Oswagu. First of all, I want to thank the board and just all of the teachers that have done such an excellent job to get this school year started. My name is Rosalind Oswagu. I do have 2 daughters that attend Issaquah School District, actually Challenger Elementary School to be specific. I have a 1st grader. I also have a 4th grader. And my concern today is that, as many parents have stated before myself, we don't have the details that's needed to make an informed decision. It's great that we have strived as a school district to get our kids back in person, but and thank you so much for also sharing those links. But I think during these meetings, it would be nice if we heard more details, such as what is the time frame? What is the time that AM 1st grader will be attending school? What is the time frame that a PM school child will be attending? Do families get a pick which session they're in? What happens when a teacher is sick? What happens when a child is sick? Obviously, yes, the child is subject to quarantine immediately, but then what happens to all the other students and the teacher that have been in the classroom with the student or whoever is sick? All of those things, amongst many other things, like I don't have to consider busing, fortunately, but even just the plan around that those things need to be addressed during the school board meeting, not just through the emails that we receive. And again, I think it's been very clear that the communication it's been better, but we definitely need more details to the plan for the families to be able to make an informed decision, the best decision for our families, and obviously in consideration for our teachers in the school. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next, I have Courtney Everson. Courtney Everson. This will be a last call for Courtney. Hands down. Samantha Tal. I'm looking for Samantha Tal. Last call for Samantha Tal to unmute your video. Okay, we'll move on. Next, I have Molly Bankson. And I've asked you to unmute, so you should be able to unmute now.
Thank you. I teach 1st grade and I love my job. I love my kids. I can say with full confidence that there is not a single teacher who does not wish that we were with kids right now, that the circumstances were safe for us to be with kids right now. But I can also say that being in the conversations that teachers are having, being in the staff meetings, there's a lot of wonderings going on, which is great because that gets our brains thinking and preparing. But what I'm really wondering is where there will be a setting where those questions will be addressed, where they will be asked and answered, and where there will be space for feedback, because we're living it right now, and we feel like that needs to be heard. What we're doing needs to be heard. What's working needs to be heard. And also being able to really meet the kids where they're at. Our school district prides itself on being student focused. One of the ways we do that is differentiation. And if I have a class that is between pre-K reading level and end of 2nd grade reading level, and I put 10 of them in a room and I can't make a small group work because they're all 6 feet apart, where I could do that on Zoom, how are we going to meet those kiddos where they are, especially how the cohorts are formed, right? If I have 2 kids who are end of 2nd grade reading level and 2 kids who are pre-K and all across the board, how am I going to be meeting them where they're at if I don't have that opportunity to do that small group? And the other concern is what some people have shared. This sounds like 2 full-time jobs. Being able to support them. These kiddos are the high need kids, but they're also the most dependent. Our kiddos struggle with 2-step directions. So how am I going to send them off to be successful for 3 hours with no check-ins during that time? So I think mainly my question and my hope is that you'll consider some time to give teachers who usually spend a month in the classroom setting up routines and their physical classroom, giving them time to prepare and create an environment where we can feel successful and we can set these kids up for success. Because without that time to process and plan and get those questions asked and answered, it's going to be hard. It's going to be hard to give that smile and relationship that makes those kids feel confident and successful, because that's ultimately what we all want. We want to create that environment for them. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Next, I have B. Sullivan. And if you could share your first name, since it's not showing up on your screen.
Sorry, I don't know how to change it on my iPhone. So I'm Brooke Sullivan. We have 4 kids, 2 at Issaquah Valley in 5th and 2nd grade, and then 2 are in preschool. At a local preschool around. And I want to also just express my support for what you guys have done to move us towards reopening. I know it's a really scary time. Claire, can you go out? I'm speaking out of meeting. Sorry. There's a lot of changing information, but I did want to express the support. I also want to say I'm really supportive, and I think our teachers have done an amazing job. And there's a lot of positives that have come out of this whole thing. The virtual curriculum night I thought was amazing, and I hope we just keep that. Kind of a little levity there, but I know that the communication is really hard during this time because things change. In my work, I actually was part of a pretty public reopening, and it's very difficult. And so I just want to also acknowledge that and appreciate the attempt to get information out even before all details were available. And I know that brings even more angst and even more questions. But I do want to express my support and our family's support of that. And I've spoken to others who also support that. And then the last comment is just, I've heard a lot about the scene effects of going back and the scene risks. But I do also just want to say, I do think there's a lot of unseen risks and effects of not having the option to go back. Again, I also support the choice, and I'm glad that we are doing that. And I know that brings other difficulties as well. But I do think there are a lot of unseen risks in not allowing certain families that do choose to go back. And so thank you for your work in making sure that we do have that option, because public school, as it's been developed and all of that, is done best. And spoken by one of our teachers at curriculum night, it is best in person, and they don't see the long-term benefit of this other than, obviously the immediate containment of the virus. So thank you for all you've done, and I turn over the rest of my time.
Thank you.
If I had any.
Perfect.
Thanks.
Perfect time. Right. Next, I have Andy Springer. Okay, I've sent the request to unmute.
Hi. Sorry, my computer's about to die. I'm trying to plug it in. Okay. Hi. Thank you for, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for taking time to allow us to comment. I am a first grade teacher, and I have a lot of strong feelings, as some people in here also have mentioned that they have a lot of strong feelings that this is a really positive move. I've heard a lot of contradicting statements about how remote learning is going really well and family feedback is really great and everyone's in their routine and is wonderful. So then that doesn't really make sense in my head of why we are rushing to change that. children and students, especially kids who are going through something traumatic right now. We have to remember that these are 5, 6, 7-year-olds, and this is traumatic to them. And to finally have a routine in place, to finally fall in love with a teacher and to see an adult face that besides outside their home, that cares about them and loves them, that they've built a rapport with, that they have a classroom and a community now, because we have been working so hard to build that. And it is going way more successfully than I think any of us ever thought. So then to think about ripping that away from them and throwing them into more trauma by possibly changing their class, by possibly changing their teacher, by completely changing their routine, only adds unnecessary trauma. And if we're being realistic, somebody in the district, in the school, is going to get COVID. And then we are going to throw them back again into a hybrid situation and completely uproot their routines. It seems unnecessary to me, and it feels icky, just to put it in a first grade term. Also, as it's been mentioned before, it does feel like this is twice the amount of work. It was explained that during the time when one of the cohorts is not with us, they will be working on asynchronous activities and independent work. Those asynchronous activities don't just come out of the air. We spend hours making them, hours. And so then we're making those, we have kids in front of us. We have then to log on and do online learning with the children. I don't see how I'm going to handle that. I'm also a mom of 2 at home, and it just doesn't feel realistically possible to me what you are asking of us to do, and what you're asking of the children to put on a brave face for. And
2 minutes.
Thank you. I just want to finish my last thought. Also, speaking of explaining things to 6 and 7-year-olds, we do things in like 1, 2, 3 steps, and asking a child to realistically social distance or realistically not hug their friend or realistically wear their mask all day is completely unrealistic. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I have Emily Sondland.
Whew, you made it.
Hi.
Hello.
Wow, there have been some really incredibly well-spoken teachers that have gone before me who have said a lot of what I was thinking and feeling as well. I think the district right now is asking us to put a lot of blind trust in them when I don't feel like they have earned that trust this year. This has been a very rocky and difficult start, and part of it is how unsupported I have felt from admin. I know that our teaching and learning services is doing so much work, but I still, this first month, I've felt completely on my own with what I've had to do. And we've done so much work and we're making things work. And so now to hear that we are going to be going back with such a flimsy plan, and as people have mentioned, the online teaching as well as teaching asynchronous, that is 2 different jobs, when right now just the full in-time person is enough of a job for me, versus also then having to do this asynchronous learning, which, as we just heard, these assignments that we do, these take hours. They take so much time. I don't understand the rush. I don't understand the push. And if we do end up going back, then what are the plans for the future? If we then get sent back, or if we go back a phase like many places in the country have had to do, and then we go back to asynchronous, and it just, every single time we do that, it's a complete uprooting. It's a relearning of routines. It takes so much work. I feel it must be so nice to not be the first on the chopping block right now as a primary teacher. I just feel completely overwhelmed and unsupported. And these plans, I just don't know how they're going to work. I don't know how you want me to go in and set up my classroom that has been empty since March in a span of days, when normally we have weeks without students where we're not teaching, to be able to go in and set that up. All of this takes so much time and so much work. And when I hear all of these plans, what I hear is that this work that we have done doesn't matter, because when we go in, everything restarts. And then if we have to go back to asynchronous, then that work that we did, it doesn't matter.
2 minutes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I have Purvi. And Purvi, when you get on, if you could share your full name so that for the public record.
Hi, my name is Purvi Marfatia, and I have a child going to Issaquah High. And first of all, I would like to thank the school district for doing a great job for the remote virtual learning. I think it's been really going well. I just wanted to voice my concerns about when you all start thinking about having the high schoolers coming back to school and what the hybrid model would look like. And if the child is only going to be learning 2 days with live teachers, I think that's going to be very difficult because, right now they're doing 4 days, and now to go back to 2 in a high school setting is very difficult, especially if they're preparing for AP exams. And just voicing the concerns that other parents have already raised. Before we, as high school parents, are, as and when asked to make a choice between remote or coming back as in a hybrid model, more information needs to be shared on what that looks like. A child would be meeting 150 kids per day, going to 7 classes of 30 kids each. What happens if one child gets COVID? Are 150 children going to be quarantined? What's going to happen to the teaching? So I think just more information needs to be given to us, and whether teachers are going to be the same before we are asked to make a choice. That's it. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Next, I have Vidhu Nadagandi. And the request to unmute.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi there. My name is Vidhu Nadangadi. I have a 3rd grader and an 8th grader in Issaquah School District, and I'm a paraprofessional in an elementary school in Issaquah School District too. Now, I'm really concerned about reopening the school. Last flu season, one of my students, she comes up to me and says, I'm not feeling too good because I threw up yesterday night. So there's a kid in our school who threw up yesterday night and she was at school the next day. So how do we trust that the kids or the kids who are coming in are not sick? That's my biggest concern. And my kiddo who goes to elementary school, in her bus, there are 3 to 4 kids sitting in one seat. And from our bus stop, we have about 15 kids who go in the school bus. Now, if we are doing the cohort, when do we start school? Does it mean that she will have to go to school an hour or 2 early so that there will be less number of kids in the bus? I'm really, really concerned about everything right now, and it's not good. It's really not good. And I hope that the board and the school district can give us a little bit more information. And with the remote learning, it's going great. We love our teachers. We don't want our teachers to change, and we don't want our teacher to say, by the way, from tomorrow, I won't be your teacher. That won't be cool. My 3rd grader would be heartbroken if she hears that from her teacher. That's all. Thank you.
Great, thank you. I do want to say that there are a lot of hands raised. So if you have actually heard somebody else say something that you were going to say, feel free to lower your hand. You are always welcome to email us at schoolboard@issaquah.wednet.edu. But I'm not going to be able to get through all of you in the next 15 minutes. So if you've already heard somebody say the same thing that you were going to say, you can use, there's like the clap commands or different ones that you can use to specify your support instead of public comment. Next, I'm going to go to Whitney Gardner.
All right, so here we are 2 weeks from your last meeting. And I want to specifically, a mother of 5 children, just want to talk about my 4th child, which is my son, Diego, who has Down syndrome. One of the benefits of not being the first person to talk is that you get to listen. And the one thing, although I'm the only parent that has talked about their child with special needs tonight, the one underlying message that I've heard come from teachers and from parents is the lack of communication that's coming from the school district. Now, that just doesn't apply to my specific situation, but to lots of families. And I have to tell you, I applaud your efforts in getting my child back to school, because we are now well into our 3rd week of school and my son has not attended a minute, not a single minute. I received as a side note in an email from his teacher, Diego is scheduled to start school next Tuesday from 8:30 to 11. It wasn't even what the content of the email was about. The email was about trying to schedule another IEP meeting to get him engaged. To this point, I don't know if he'll have the same LRC2 teacher. I have no idea what his bus schedule is, so I've not been able to work on any type of routine with him. And you know what? My family had to make a very difficult decision in the last 2 weeks, and my husband quit work just so that he could stay home and supervise our 13-year-old with Down syndrome, because he had to stop coming to the office with me. So now my family is at risk for losing our health insurance. So my comments are not unique, but all of our families across the board are suffering in different ways. I heard a gentleman earlier talk about the fact that he's moved his office from being in an office to being at home, and it's working for his family. But I appreciate that you heard that it's not working. Just some of the words I've heard from my fellow parents in the LRC2 classrooms is they feel voiceless, they feel unheard, they're tired of battling over and over again. This is a
2 minutes
common thread, and I wish you all the best of luck as you return to school and keep people healthy.
Great. Thank you. Next, I have Christy Grabowski.
Hello?
And I think I sent, we can hear you.
Okay, can you see me?
Yes.
Okay, I can't see myself. Okay, I just left my notes in the other room, but hopefully I'll get everything. First of all, thank you so much for getting this discussion started. I was really thrilled to get this message. Although I only have 2 high schoolers and it doesn't directly affect me, I know how important it is for everyone else in the district, and I'm glad you're getting the ball rolling. Want to address 2 things. One is safety, and one is just some ideas of what I'm hearing around planning. First, I'm glad there hasn't been too many issues about safety. I think everybody is agreeing that it can be safe. Even the governor says so. Our numbers are good, and the BASC program has been so successful, as well as summer school. And also, I just want, for those people who are worried, the news is just showing where it has gone wrong. There's millions of kids out there who are successful. We would go back in masks. They have a great safety. But the thing I want to address more is I'm hearing a lot of people around around planning, particularly for the teachers, and I can appreciate that. So I just want to throw out 2 potential ideas. I know it's going to really come down to what the union decides and whether they go back or not on October 15th. But if it does get delayed, one thing to possibly consider is maybe bringing in more of the elementary all at once. That would give everybody time to plan. And if it's a hybrid option, they are in different groups. So I don't think it would make a whole lot of difference to bring them back all at once. I know a lot of other districts are doing that, including Puyallup and ton across the US. And I'm sure there's a lot other ones here. Another option that I've also thought of, maybe it wouldn't work so well with the kindergartners and 1st graders, but it would definitely work, I think, with older elementary and definitely high school and middle school. I know Eastside Christian is doing it, and many others, is where you can Zoom, you can have the people, everybody has their computers. So on the days they're there, they can actually be Zooming with everyone else. So the teacher is teaching in person and the kids are listening. The ones who are remote are still getting the live lessons. Okay, again, might not work for the younger ones, but would for the older. And anyway, I'm just afraid that, especially having middle school or high schoolers, that if this process doesn't get started, I would hate for, just because of logistics and planning, that the kids don't get back at the semester or something. And even if COVID goes down to 0, the school hasn't planned. So I'm just urging you to plan. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I have Renee Associé. There, I set the unmute.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Renee Saucier. I'm the parent of a third grader who goes to IVE, and I'm also an ELL teacher and work with some very vulnerable kids. And as a teacher, I know one of the most important things for instruction is the relationship we have for kids. We've spent an entire month getting to know our kids, having family connection meetings, and really getting to know our students' academic strengths. I hear that ISD is going to be surveying teachers about if they're able to go back or not. So what I envision happening is that a lot of kids are going to have a disruption in the teacher that they're going to be able to be with. And then now, as we've been in a phase where it's been summer and we all know that it's fall and rainy in Seattle, and we're all going to be forced indoors. So we all can envision what's going to happen next is that our numbers are going to start going back up. I have not seen a trend in the COVID dashboard going down. So now that our numbers go up when we're back in person, we've risked student lives, we've risked teacher lives, then we're going to have to return to remote learning again. And now we're going to have to switch classes again, and the kids are not going to be with their class. So I just see that all of this disruption is not worth the actual academic benefit. And when we look at being in person, we have to realize to keep a 6-foot distance, you're not having a group of kindergartners congregating on a rug for a story. You aren't able to confer with your writers side by side. You do not have kids at a small group table with you being able to give reading instruction. So when we say we're going to return to in-person, it's not really in person. We have EAs in our buildings. We do not have the infrastructure, the PPE, and everything needed to make this happen. I do not see how the academic benefit really outweighs the health risk. And when we
2
look,
minutes.
It's 2 minutes?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Great. Thank you. Next, I have Julian. I don't have a last name, so if you could supply your last name. There, you're unmuted.
All right, perfect. Thank you. Hey, my name is Megan Saunders. Jillian is my wife, and we are parents of twins in ECE. They're in their second year of preschool, and this is the first year at Holly Street. And teachers over there have been extremely helpful in educating us on how this is going to work. Of course, it's not ideal. I want to say, we have a split situation where one of our children, it is just absolutely not working. The Zoom school, no matter what the teachers do, it's a battle. And the other one is sitting there learning, and it's split for us. So when the choice came out that we get to send them to school or not, it was very difficult for us to choose. And of course, going back to all of the conversations and all of the comments about health versus benefits, I don't disagree. It's not an easy choice, and there is no right choice. It just doesn't work. So with that said, I have a couple questions, and I'm hoping that I can get some answers at some point, specifically because they're going to be in portables in this new Holly Street location. What is the water situation like? They're new, like, can they wash their hands? I don't even know what that looks like. Yes, sanitation and the hand stuff, right? That's all available. But what about washing hands? What about sneezing, right? These kids, they're special needs. There's no way there's no way they're going to wear a mask. It's just not possible. They're practicing, it won't work. And that makes me worried for other students, right? We're both parents that stay at home. We do not go to the grocery store. We don't go to parks. We don't go out.
Okay.
But there's no way for us to bubble. 2 minutes. Water, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I have Jamie Street. Jamie Street. Okay, and last call for Jamie Street. Okay, we're going to move on then to Diana Goldberg.
Hi, can you hear me?
Diana? We
Hi.
can hear you.
Great. So I am the parent of two Issaquah High School students. My younger son just started as a freshman and my older son is a junior. And let me just start by saying the beginning of online school this year has been dramatically better than what spring was. So I totally appreciate all the hard work that has gone into it. However, it still is not the equivalent of live in person. And I just wanted to speak and let the board and the superintendent know that even though I have high school students, I'm so appreciative to see the move to get back into the classroom and in person. It's extremely difficult for my junior to teach himself trigonometry when he's got, class and his teacher is doing everything she can, but it's just not the same as having the interaction in school. And these students, these teenagers have been basically locked up with their parents for months on end, which is not ideal for teenagers. And the amount of anxiety that they have when they look at the remainder of the year and they think they're not going to go back, it is so concerning to me. So I just want to say I'm so appreciative of you moving in that direction. I know there's a lot of logistics that have to be worked out and it's very complicated, but I wanted to voice my support and my appreciation for moving in that direction because these teenagers need normalcy. And my junior in particular, he was going to be competing for college admissions in 2 years with kids who had possibly 2 months of remote learning, not 6+ months. So moving in that direction is key and important. And thank you so much.
Great. Thank you. And I believe this will likely be our last person because we're coming up on our 1 hour mark. So I have Susan Kelly. Susan Kelly? There you go. You've been given an unmute.
Hey, thank you. So I'm a teacher in 5th grade, and I've heard great things and true things. So I'll just be quick and say that in my class, I've got 100% participation, including kids who have a history of truancy. So remote learning for me is going very well. So I can echo that many parents have been very pleased and surprised with remote learning. We all recognize the routine and rhythm and hum that we've got going. And that's what scares me. In the summer, I took some Issaquah district classes to include one called Reimagine the Classroom. And it really focused on the significance of SEL and our kids' socio-emotional needs. And as we know from Maslow's hierarchy, we need kids to feel stable. We need kids to have routine. We need kids to be part of a group. We need kids to be empowered as learners. And that is all happening right now. That will not happen if this is shattered. And I see this being such a premature, impulsive, and I get impulsive maybe a strong word, but it's a very, I get it that it's complex, but it will be shattering to these kids to be disrupted, for me to split from my kids, only to have them thrown together, their world rocked, and then put back into school to have what we all know is very likely to happen, a COVID breakout, whatever, and then have to bounce back. To me, the SEL risk is much greater to see these kids bouncing back and forth. It's already happening in current schools here in Washington. I just don't see that bouncing as a good thing. And best case scenario, I get that you guys have a plan with K1, but I have 26 sweaty 5th graders in a portable. And even dividing them in half, we are a full portable. I can't imagine walking these kids. Best case scenario, you socially distance them. So if everything goes great, they don't see any other student groups. They don't see any other staff in the building. 2 minutes per person to wash their hands, 6 feet apart. How long does that go? I don't know. We've got some
2
real
minutes.
math problems to do right now. So I'm also worried about teachers, as others have said, sustaining 2 sets of planning. So I think it's very premature. I think it's going to waste teachers and waste kids' mental states.
Thank you. I see there's still several hands, and I do want to, again, in fact, if I could have Stephen or Diane maybe put it in the chat, how you can email the board your comments. So we read every email that comes to us, as well as being able to hear you tonight. So please feel free to do that. With that, I wanted to then open it up to our school board to have any other discussions or questions about this agenda item to the update for the school year. Suzanne.
Marnie, I want to just address a couple of things that we heard. I'm not sure if there's a question in here. There's probably more just comments. The first thing is we heard a lot of comment about communication and about there we go, and about the fact that there wasn't enough information and people couldn't deal with the fact that there wasn't enough information in the communication. And the school board has to own that. I don't want to throw the superintendent under the bus, because we felt that communication needed to go out, even if we didn't have all the facts, even if we didn't have all the information, because if we weren't communicating, people thought we weren't working on the problem. So I think the board has to own that. I personally am the one who said, put it out, even if it's messy, because some communication is better than none. So I'm sorry that people were upset by that. I still stand by that some communication is better than none, but I do also understand that people had a lot more questions, and let me just assure people that you will have the answers as soon as we do. The other thing I wanted to talk about was the fact that we've heard from so many people, not just tonight, but in emails, that remote learning is going so well, and they are so happy with remote learning, and why do we want to turn that upside down? And the fact that students and teachers have really good connections right now, and why do we want to turn that upside down? And on the one hand, I really appreciate hearing that. I think it's great that remote learning is going so well, and I think it's great that kids have made good connections with their teachers, because I know how important that is. At the same time, I think we just have to remember that that's not true for everyone. We have also heard from a lot of families. They may have both parents working away from home. They may have a single mom or a single dad who doesn't work at home, can't support the kids while they're doing remote learning. There are just some kids for whom remote learning doesn't work very well. And if we stay in a fully remote situation, we know there is just a group of kids that we are leaving behind. There's no other way to say that. So I'm thrilled that remote learning is working well for so many parents and for so many students. But at the same time, we know that there are kids who just really need to be back in the schools because it's not working at all. I know that's difficult. And, you know, it's one of those horrible trade-offs that school boards have to make. I guess I do have one question, which is just, and I know there's a ton of moving parts here, but how are we going to try to keep kids with their teachers as much as possible versus having to switch? Do we know how that's going to work?
I don't have the answer to that.
No, I thought the superintendent
Well,
might.
yeah, and I see Jody just lit up her video as well. The one thing I will say, and then Assistant Superintendent Bongard may be able to add some detail to it, is if the teacher comes back in and the students come back in, they will come in together. So you won't have to lose them. What will create a situation where we will have to make changes is, for example, if I don't want to go in and my teacher does, well, then now that's going to be a difference. Or vice versa, if I want to go in, but my teacher doesn't or can't, then that could create that kind of a change. But if they all want to flow together, then they'll go from remote to the hybrid together. Am I missing something there, Jody?
No, and again, you know, as I stated earlier, we're going to do everything we can to keep teachers with their students. I'm a former elementary teacher, taught every grade level at elementary. I know how important those connections are. I know how hard our teachers have been working to form those relationships and the family connections as well. And I've heard great feedback from our parents about that. So that's an integral part of making this work. Again, there may be cases where we're not able to do that because teachers may not be able to return. But that is absolutely our intent.
And I would just add, because I heard a lot of, well, maybe it was in the emails, parents said, my child has established a relationship with this teacher and she is such a wonderful teacher. And I do want to assure people that virtually all of our teachers in Issaquah are wonderful teachers, and you might have to start over again in that relationship building, but you will still have a wonderful teacher. So I don't want to lose sight of that. Thank you.
Marnie, can I add on to that? Which is, would we consider giving families the choice if the most important thing for that family was to stay with the teacher, that they take that choice, and whether the teacher goes back into the building or stays remote, for whatever reason, the way that teacher is assigned, that student stays with the teacher.
You're muted, Jake.
Well, so maybe I'll pipe in a little bit. There's a lot of complexity matching supply and demand in this case. I'll speak to you as the person that has to do staffing. Numerically, I don't do the staffing from a human resources standpoint. So right now, we are unsure, and we are going to solicit families and staff again shortly on trying to make that balance. So we have the variable of, am I going to be a remote teacher or going to be brick and mortar? And the same thing on the student side. So matching those, and then we also have the bus route and transportation logistics. So I would say, Director Moore, that's not how the plans are shaking out to be. I think we're going to have a difficult climb just to find the right amount of in-person teachers to match our brick and mortar students who want to go back. So I think that's our primary goal. And the superintendent, Thiele, and Assistant Superintendent Bungard said that we understand the importance of the relationship and totally get it. But these are, and we've heard uncharted, unprecedented, these are way different times. And this is, in many cases, going to be the start of a new school year for our students as they transition in.
And I'd like to underscore that a little bit on this point, at least from my seat. I think there's also the factor, the non-COVID factors to be considered of why that matching may not work. Other leaves, maternity leaves, resignations, having gone through, this district with kids, I think my son has had 2 teacher changes for wonderful news as babies, right? So I really do deeply understand that tie to the teacher, but I will tell you, my 5th grader survived happily 1st grade, and he survived, I think it was 3rd, both of which where we had new bundles of joys that he got to meet in person as well. So for me, that part a bit does stick out, is there's many other non-COVID reasons that make that matching, very difficult in this circumstance as well, that folks have got to understand that in this environment as well. I have, if I can keep the mic, if that's okay. Yeah. I can't hear you, Marnie. Is that okay?
Can you not hear me?
I can now.
Oh, okay.
So I guess from my perspective, I have some specific questions, but I guess the way I'd love to frame our ongoing conversation is in what must be true. I think we all believe that in-person school is better. I personally believe that remote learning is a lot better this time. I see the work and the effort into that. I'm also a person who believes that having a remote option for school is not a on or off switch. It is a capability that we have to have as a school district from now forward. It's one of the things I talked about before COVID is we have to have that ability. I think it's just a modern schooling capability go forward, and it's one we have to keep in our toolkit. But I really hope we can continue to frame our conversation in what must be true so that we can move forward. And if that is what must be true, that we have the right support structures in place for teachers. I love the comment earlier about the connection of essential workers to at least share the stories and the experiences that the anxiety is real and that the circumstances are trying. I can tell you as a parent in COVID, I live for parents figuring out how to do it better. So I think it's super important that we as a community talk about what must be true in order to provide the best solution for our students. And that's kids who learn in lots of different ways. I think that also is acknowledging that what must be true is the support for parents and how we deal with the anxiety of making some of these decisions and what that must be putting on the community and the strain of that. I understand that in my own, like, how do you make that decision? What if I'm wrong? What if something terrible happens? There is a support structure for parents that we have to think about. That's in my category of the things that must be true as we move forward. So that's my hope, is that we can move away from talking about the timing or the date, but just if our goal, which is certainly my goal in the seat I have, which is to move to the best experience for our students, is that we talk about what must be true and then we work from that position. Just offering that.
Okay, thank you.
Now I have a specific question before I really release the mic.
Okay.
Which is, I understand, and I'd love to hear more about, as we've talked about this for the last several months, about what is our plan and how do we address reopening. We did some amazing ahead of time purchasing in PCs and laptops as an example that has done well for us. Another area that I know that there was some proactive work in is in personal protective equipment. So I'd love to understand and talk a bit about what has been done, what we've already achieved in that space, and with the insights that Dr. Bailey gave us earlier about those, maybe the early churn and the early misuse that may cause us to go through that more quickly. How are we thinking about PPE?
Jake, I know you sent us some numbers today on various types of masks, but I'll dive in. And I know that we have purchased cloth masks, I believe. Geez, I want to say enough for 2 for every student and every staff member in the district. I think 50,000 or 60,000. We have purchased N95 masks, and we also have the disposable mask as well. I know, I believe one of the teachers in their earlier comment said, will it be their job to provide the mask? The district will provide masks. And so we did advance that. We also have shields for folks who masks aren't comfortable or maybe need protection of a mask and a shield. I know we've hundreds of those. We have temperature scanners. We have both the scanners that are run through like an iPad, and we also have the touchless thermometers as well. Hand sanitizing stations, and additional cleaning product as well from custodial. So I don't know if I'm missing anything, but I know that a lot of hundreds of thousands of dollars of PP&E have been procured.
And Superintendent, I think Assistant Superintendent Heckman and maybe Executive Director Turney are on the Zoom, because they are really the content area experts in this, because they've been working since March on procurement. So I don't know if Lisa or Martin are on and can provide the color that we need to fill in the context.
See Lisa.
Sure. Oh, Sorry, I am happy to add a couple of things. So we have everything from the pieces that we would be needing in order to change a student if that was going to be necessary. So we have blue pads, we have shoe coverings, we have gloves, we have the masks as Ron talked about. We have the N95 masks, the face shields, we have the gowns so that staff are going to be able to don and doff gowns. We actually are training staff beginning tomorrow for this first wave of students who are coming back, taking advantage of some of those pieces that Dana shared earlier today around what Lake Washington had learned. So our Dr. Thies, our our health services supervisor, will be training teachers and paraprofessionals and nurses and HRS is our health room specialists starting tomorrow around how to don and doff all of the various PPE pieces. Martin, I can only say that Martin Turney and Dave Montalvo, but Martin especially was key, and we are very fortunate to have him because of his forward thinking in the number of pieces that we were able to secure. Swedish Hospital as well has contributed a fit test kit for us so that we will be able to fit test our N95s again starting tomorrow. And we have had a number of community members reach out to us who are in the medical field to provide their support and expertise, as well as advice on how we are moving forward in order to make sure that students and staff are protected. We still are waiting for guidance from Labor and Industries. I know, Director Moore, that you had shared with us that link from Tacoma today. I am sorry to say I don't know what guidance they are referencing. I was on a call earlier this evening with one of our lawyers trying to just get another piece from to make sure that I hadn't missed anything from L&I or OSHA, and we are well over a month overdue for some of their guidance. But Director Mullins, we have everything and then some that you could wish for, mainly because Executive Director Turney was able to secure those items for us along with Dave Montalvo.
Anything else?
Thank you.
Anne.
Lisa, but I'm sorry. I was going to say, do you want to touch, Martin, briefly on our release on the attestation process and software, because that's part of the kind of what accompanies PPE often in our conversations. If that would be okay.
Do you not have access to? Oh, sorry. I guess I had to. We didn't let you do it, so you should be able to unmute now.
Yeah. I
had you restricted.
Thank you. Martin Turney, Executive Director of Finance and Support Services. Thank you, Lisa. I was actually going to touch on briefly that we've also beefed up on various custodial supplies and equipment, including backpack sprayers that helps us do very quick work of disinfecting throughout the buildings, touch points, and anywhere else that we need to do a tight cleaning on. So as far as the attestation, I'm not sure, Lisa, if that's something you might be able to touch on specifically. I just wanted to throw in that about the custodial supplies and equipment.
Yeah, I'm definitely interested in the attestation piece. So if you could do that.
Certainly. So for this first phase of students who are, so let me even start now. Currently, what we use is a Google form for all of our staff. It's electronic. Our principals are far more technologically savvy even than I am and have produced QR codes for their staff so that you can use your smartphone in order to do a daily attestation prior to or upon entering the offices and entering our buildings. As we move to welcome this first set of students back this coming week, we are going to use hard copy. We're going to go a little more low tech, in part because of the age of the students that we're using. This is going to be our ECE and ECAP programs are involved with this too. So the daily attestation that essentially we take on a daily basis electronically is going to be a hard copy. So that's your bus ticket. That's a ticket to be able to interact with families as we welcome them to start their educational journey with us. We are shifting, as Jake was mentioning, and using Qualtrics, which is one of the software companies with which we work that do a lot of our surveying, and developing an electronic attestation that will be pushed out to families via email on a daily basis, and also to students via text messages, particularly for our secondary students. On a daily basis. So you will complete the survey very similar to what you have seen so far on electronically. A report comes back in then to each school and sets up whether or not you are approved to be able to enter our buildings or to be able to attend school. So you can come to work, or if you're going to be a visitor, there's an option for visitors to take as well. And those reports will, for students, go to the attendance secretary and the COVID supervisors in each building, and for staff to the COVID supervisors who happen to be administrators in each of our buildings, so that on a daily morning basis, or as students at your secondary level, if we do have the opportunity to have them return and they come back throughout the day, that we will be able to have those reports throughout the day. So Jake was instrumental in being able to free up that opportunity for us to work with Qualtrics, and we jumped on it as we are looking to have 20,000 students on a daily basis be able to say, yes, we're healthy. So everybody is going to be experiencing your daily COVID-19 health symptoms check electronically as you eat your Wheaties.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from the board? Anne?
As we talked about masks, and some people have raised the issue and the question, will kids be required to wear masks, or will they be optional? And then how will we work with students that don't want to wear a mask?
I think that's a completely good question. Yes, everybody who enters our buildings is required to wear a mask or a face covering of some kind. And we have posters up on most of our entry doors to be able to provide the various models that show coming above the nose and then at least below the chin. We have focused and continue to do so on the King County Public Health advice around cloth face coverings. And if we have students that are needing to practice that skill, much like we had shared in the town hall presentation, was hoping that everybody would start now as they just interacted in their regular lives, because getting used to how your face moves and what it means and the extra effort it takes to talk with a cloth mask. We wanted everybody, especially our students, to have that become just a ready habit. What we learned from summer school is those students really had practiced well, and we truly did not have refusals. We didn't have any strong consternation about having and interacting with face masks. We built in to the day the opportunity to go outside. It was welcomed by both staff and our students to make sure that we were well distanced out on our play fields, where we could then sort of take off the mask for a minute and give ourselves just a chance to breathe before going back on and going back into doing some in-classroom learning. If students are refusing to wear a mask, we'll take that one first. It is going to be a conversation with the student, and it would be a conversation with the family, just like we would do with other behaviors that we were trying to ameliorate or that we were trying to adjust with any student. This is one where if there is just abject refusal and we don't have a medical reason, we don't have other issues that would be creating an offense to that barrier, well, it isn't going to be an opportunity right now for you to probably be with us then in person and learning. And we're fortunate that we're going to be able to continue to have the remote learning opportunities. For students or staff who are physically unable to wear a mask, we have processes through the American with Disabilities Act to be able to have those interactive processes for students through their individualized education plans, maybe through their 504 health plan, where we will need to interact and have documentation and conversation around why it's an inability to wear a mask and have that be part of their daily attire.
Any other questions or comments?
Lots.
Would you like to start? What's your
Sure.
first one?
I think I want to sort of reference a lot of comments that other board members have made. You know, I think that remote learning does work for a lot of people, but I think we've been really focused on equity, and I think it really highlights the inequities. And I'm really concerned about the students who don't have those supports at home. And those are the students that are being left behind. And I think that that's something that we need to keep in front of us. I appreciate that the superintendent did send out the email notification, and it was 4 weeks before the K-1 potential return to school date. And I think my understanding is that there had already been previous email communication to our students or families of special education students who may be going back. So it wasn't that they're going back next week on the September 28th. That went out to the whole community, but that the special education committee had been given prior notice to that. So I really appreciate that. And I get how some people may feel that 4 weeks still seems fast. There are many districts that gave their families 1 or 2 weeks notice, like Tacoma, for example. Some things that I heard from the public comment was waiting until after winter break because that's when the flu season is over. Just to clarify, so in Washington State, our influenza season doesn't typically start until the middle of December. And so it runs from December through March. So really this fall timeframe is trying to do that before influenza. And if you actually look at the data, and we have to, let's try and ground ourselves in what we know is the truth, as Dr. Moines has said. All the Southern Hemisphere countries, we typically look at what is the influenza season like there. And it has been the most insignificant influenza season on history, recorded history, like a 0.1% transmission or prevalence rate. And probably because of all of the masking and distancing that we're doing. So to me, that's really reassuring that we're actually not seeing a lot of influenza. I'm not saying we should get our flu shots. I already got mine. But it does tell me that not only do these interventions, are they preventing COVID, but they're also impacting the decreased transmission of respiratory viruses as a whole, which will help us because it is such a mimicker. I am concerned that I don't believe that the vaccine is going to roll out in a fashion that would see our children getting it before summer of 21. And so I think it's not unrealistic, as much as this pains me to say, for us to think that we may be in the same situation at the start of the next school year. And I think that would be my response to a lot of people for like, why is there this seem like this rush? And my response would be like, I can't in good faith say that our kindergartners and first graders and preschoolers should go 2 years without learning how to read. And that really scares me because it's going to set them back for a lifetime. And our job is to make sure that we can do that. I think the other thing is when we look at this potential start of kindergarten and first grade, it wasn't chosen because, it was what made sense because it's the start of our greater age bands. It was really because the science says at this age, these children are the lowest risk. And this has been something that's been said throughout all public health agencies at every level. And it's been supported by data. And when we look at even other states who've now been open for school for a month, and you look at their data, you definitely see a spike in COVID cases in the 10 to 19 and the 20 to 29 age groups, but you just don't see that in the 0 to 10 age groups. And I think that's really, again, reassuring to what we already have known about this, is that the transmission rates are so much lower in the younger age groups, and it's not for lack of testing. I think we understand the risks as good as we're going to understand them for this. And so I don't think that waiting any longer is going to help us learn or understand more. So I think when we hear from the superintendent that everything is in place and that the classrooms are in place and ready, and that the teacher cohorts are done, and that the IEA negotiations are done, I think that's the time when we'll be ready. But I definitely wouldn't recommend ever bringing all elementary at once, because I think that's where we have seen in other states when they brought the whole school in at once, that's been problematic. I honestly don't know how we're gonna ever bring 4th and 5th grade into the elementary classrooms. And I know you've heard me share that with you, Ron, already. Like those kids are over 10, and that if the data shows us that under 10 is less risk and over 10 is more risk, I don't want to put the whole building at risk just to bring more kids in the classroom. Like, we have to do what our data shows makes sense. I do like that our surrounding districts, so Snoqualmie Valley and Toma, both have the option of what I think Director Moore mentioned, is the options are remote, in person, or stay with your teacher no matter what decision that the teacher makes. I don't know if it's phrased in those wording, but I think that is something that I think would help address a lot of the concerns that our families have. And I don't have a kindergartner or first grader, so I don't know what communication has gone out to them to comment on that. And then, have there been any, I didn't hear any comments from our staff about testing and testing options for our teachers. I don't know what the district's decision has been on that, but I think that having testing options for rapid testing for our teachers and staff will be really important. I think we should also explore partnerships with Swedish. If we just said, hey, on Wednesday afternoons, for example, why I say that is because then if there's on average a 36-hour time turnaround, that would be getting the result on Friday to then, make the phone calls over the weekend and prepare whatever decision making for the following Monday. I think that would be something worth exploring. And I think that I suspect that the superintendent has had discussions with surrounding district superintendents, that while his email may have been the first of the date, that I suspect that there are other districts around us that are also looking in that similar time frame. So again, like, I think the superintendent was responding to what the school board asked him to do, which was to provide communication earlier, even if it wasn't complete. And so I agree with what Director Reaver said. Like, we own that, because that's what we have asked for, because we got a lot of feedback in July about just give us information. But I think that could be balanced for our teachers, and I get the teachers' concerns. We've got several emails from our staff to say, like, gosh, we got this notice so much sooner. I mean, so little time from when the rest of the community got it. They felt that was unfair, and I don't know a better answer to that. But I think that what it could have been is all these PPE discussions that you've shared with us. That would be a great probably town hall presentation for our staff. I think they need to know all the work that you guys have been doing behind the scenes. So in that communication, if it was like, hey, we know there's a lot of questions on this date at this time, we are going to have this town hall to start the first of many conversations about what this is going to look like, I think would give the message of like, hey, we're letting you know, but yes, we're also going to share with you these, things that we're thinking of, that we're working on, that we want to continue to help support you and make sure that we can mitigate these risks as much as humanly possible. And then last thing I would say is, I think we as a board need to meet in person, regardless of what any OPMA changes are or aren't. The governor just released guidance on Tuesday, allowing for now business meetings to meet in convention and event space at just reduced capacity, but not with a cap. So if now private businesses, and I am already planning for our October meeting to be in person, socially distanced. But I think that we have to model that. And if we're going to ask for our staff to do that, at this point, I don't even really care what OPMA says. I'm willing for them to slap me on the wrist. But I think that we need to lead by showing that we aren't going to be asking our staff to do anything that we're not willing to do. And I would love for us to spend some time at the end of this meeting at the calendar and future agenda topics to talk about that further.
Great, thank you. I was actually going to touch on that same thing with the OPMA, because that was a question that came up. It didn't come up tonight, but other people were like, hey, you guys aren't even willing to meet in person. And so I did want to specify that it's not that we're not willing to meet. It's right now that the governor has issued a proclamation that requires us to meet remotely. Also, the difference between the school board meeting and holding a classroom is that you may have noticed our classroom was 300 members large earlier today. We do all of our business in public with the exception of when we go into executive session for some very specific mandated in statute. There's only a few areas where we can break that. In fact, I think later on tonight we're holding an executive session, but otherwise everything we do, if three or more of us are together in a public setting in which we are discussing things going on in the district, then that is an open public meeting and is open to anyone from the public to watch. So I have actually, Harlan and I were at the Washington State School Directors Association board meeting. And so our executive director, Tim Gauchow, is working with Superintendent of Public Instructions, Chris Rakedahl, to try to convince the governor that it is in the best interest that the current proclamation sunset on October 1st and allow us to meet in person after that. So one of the things I suggested was that if he wants to issue a continuation of a proclamation to allow us to meet in person and broadcast our meeting live. That way the public can still watch all of those things about the Open Public Meeting Act that is important, that the community has oversight as to what the board is doing. I think that is vitally important, and I'm a staunch believer in that. But allow us to be able to do our meetings when we're in the room together. We converse in a different way. It is just a different element when we are shared space, socially distanced together, and how those conversations go. So I'm trying to see what we can do. Harlan's through WASDA trying to push to make sure that we have that ability as well. So I definitely, we can have that conversation around calendaring as we look towards our board retreat. So with that, I am only nearly 2 hours behind. So I'm going to move us on if there's no other comments from the board.
I do want to make one more comment, okay, and I'll make it quick. And it's building on the point that that Harlan made about what is the town hall setting for talking about the preparation that's been made, because there's a significant amount of preparation. I think it's how do you share that? I would like to think through or ask staff to think through how could we create some sort of day in the life video for people to walk through? Like, what will it be like walking through the door and checking in? What will it be like in the classroom? What does it physically look like? I think that there's a lot of the questions that at least I'm getting in public, out of public comments, as well as the emails, is it's not just I want more details. I want to know how it will feel. And I don't know that all of the better comms or the, a different website is going to change that. I think what people want to know is walk me through what that'll look like. Where will my kid be sitting? So I think if we can look to maybe a different medium to physically walk through what that setup will look like, I think that would go a long way.
Marnie, if I could, just a kind of a final note, because Sydney brought that up. You'll be happy to know that Devin Felix is already at work on that video. We actually proactively took footage from our summer school that Jody Bongard had referenced earlier. So you will see that. We absolutely recognize there's a need for more communication and greater detail. You always ask yourself, the message I sent out last week was over 750 words. And I often wonder, if I sent out a 1,500 word report or message like that, how much of that would get lost as well. I did note in that letter that we know there's a need for more details, and we will be coming out with more information. I referenced a tentative date right now for an October 6th town hall presentation. You can see even in the week since that my letter, how hard my staff has worked to address a lot of the very questions. And on many of the questions I heard tonight, we have answers for, and we are prepared to start pushing those answers out, both for our staff and for our community. So we will do that. And you might recall, we heard a similar thing prior to the start of the school related to the full remote open. And we did a town hall meeting, and our buildings, because that's another critical information or a delivery for us is directly from our buildings, pushed out a lot of information so that by the time the first day of school rolled around, I wasn't hearing that anymore. I think we actually did a good job of pushing out that information. I would also note, I don't want to get too far out ahead of my teams. I do value the collaboration that we have had and will continue to have with the Issaquah Education Association. Our teachers and their representation there through IEA are good problem solvers and work well with us in problem solving. And I'm sure that they get information out directly from their union as well. I mean, that way they don't have to get it just from us. You know, they don't have to worry if it's being filtered through us, but I'm sure there are communications that come out directly from their association to them as well. So, you know, we will be pushing information out. We'll be pushing it out to the community. There will be greater details. There's a lot of thinking and good thinking and problem solving that's going on around this. And I will reference, there are millions of students across this country that are in some form of in-person instruction right now. I've been having conversations with some of those superintendents as well, even in other states. And, you know, we do tend to hear a lot about where large districts, large urban centers that are fully remote and some of the issues with that. We tend to hear about the districts that maybe didn't do this right and the media focuses on COVID outbreaks. We're not hearing about the places where it's going, you know, relatively well. And that's not to say it's going to be perfect, and that's not to say there won't be COVID cases. But we also are doing the work. The toolkit was mentioned earlier as well. How to manage that when it happens. You have to assume that it will, and you have to be prepared to manage it. But I think that can all be done. I just have tremendous faith that this community can do it. My teachers, our teachers, my staff will figure this out, and we'll do it as well as anyone. And it's a daunting challenge, but I'm excited for the challenge as well. So that's all I wanted to say, Director Moraldo. I know we're running really late.
Well, and Sydney, I saw your hand.
You know, I'm not usually the one to extend. We know that about me. So, so I think the other thing I want to address, and I want to bring back up, and I know we don't have time to go into deeply, but it is something we talked about at length in previous board meetings. So maybe it's about encouraging to go back or some sort of summary. But one of the points brought up tonight, there's been other, I think, anxiety around this idea of the conflict between we are seeing staff being reduced in buildings, and we're talking about bringing kids back into the school. And I know we've spent quite a bit of time on some of the painful financial realities of our current circumstance. And so I do think it's important, since it's come up again tonight and it remains an anxiety, that is something that we've absolutely discussed at length in this forum. I don't know if there's a top line, if that's unfair to ask, but I think it's important to hit on as well.
If I understood what you were talking about, Sydney, what I think you were saying is there is a connection between our ability to employ and keep people employed and our desire to have in-person schooling. I mean, I don't know how else to say it. I need more employees to do in-person. I want to keep as many employees as we possibly can. I'll also point out, and in-person is a part of that. I mean, that's how I keep bus drivers employed, by picking up students and delivering them to the schools. And then also related to that, you know, COVID has not been the biggest financial hit that this district has taken. COVID related is our enrollment is down. I believe we're down approximately 1,000 students. And So the reality there is, I believe we will get students back over time, and it may even take until next year because I think people have left our system because they are pursuing other in-person options. I'm just going to say it. And so I believe this is all connected together, the economic issues, the employment issues, and the attendance issues. And I think having a successful in-person, the ability for us to successfully do some in-person learning should help in all of those areas. That's an opinion. I can't say it. It's not a factual statement, but it's certainly something I believe. But it's an opinion based on 3+ decades of experience in public schools.
Okay. Great. Thank you so much for this conversation. Thank you to the community members. I know somebody has their hand raised, but we have closed comments, public comments for this agenda item. Next on our docket is the technology proficiency graduation requirement. And so I am looking at a motion, looking for a motion.
Okay. I move the board remove the technology proficiency graduation requirement beginning with the 2021 graduating class.
Second.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I didn't hear that. So with this, I am assuming that our superintendent will want to give a presentation of some type.
Well, very briefly, and I'm gonna turn it over to Executive Director Hood here pretty quickly, and I see Director Diana Eggers from Teaching and Learning Services is here as well. Thank you for your consideration of this. This is something that has existed in the Issaquah School District for quite a while. I think you were pioneers a long time ago, highlighting the importance of technology, but I will also say that I think that it is something that our teachers and our system has done such a good job of embedding the use of technology into the everyday life of a student in the Issaquah School District, that it is no longer needed as a standalone graduation requirement. And so I appreciate the staff has brought this forward. I know I pushed out a lot of information to the school board to kind of support what we're talking about here, all the various ways students are able to earn and explore technology use. So I think what I'll do at this time is I'll turn it over to Executive Director Hood, and then let the staff kind of fill in and then take any questions from the board as well.
Oh,
we need to unmute.
sorry about that. I unmuted you.
Thank you so much.
I forgot I have the power.
So I think there's a couple really interesting developments that have brought us to this topic. And one of them is House Bill 1599 last year. It is a new development in that it created 8 grad pathways that kids could choose in lieu of just passing a state test. The state test remains one of those 8 grad pathways, but the CTE pathway, if you will, or sequence, is also one of those 8 opportunities for kids. And simultaneous to that, because of the 7-period day that the school board opted to put in place at Issaquah and Skyline, we saw really incredible growth in our CTE offerings and in the demand for those offerings. In fact, we averaged a 27% increase in career tech ed enrollment across the high schools. 37, I think, was the peak at Skyline. And even Liberty, though it did not add a period, it just stayed at its 8-period day, they had an increase in enrollment as well. So I think we've done such an incredible job evolving our course offerings. And outside of career tech ed, Diana Eggers has done a marvelous job, and I'll let her speak to this, kind of tracking where in the core curriculum our kids are also meeting tech standards. So Diana, I'll let you speak to that piece.
Sure. You know, over the last several years, it has come up in our ends reporting about in the ends reporting, we report how many kids take this technology class and how many kids take this technology class. And you guys are always saying, but what about everybody? What does everyone get? So over the last several years, each time we do a curriculum adoption, we're looking at what technologies are included in that adoption, whether it's an online curriculum that students would have access to, and the systems that support that online curriculum, or if it's units of study that's embedded in a curriculum. So over the last 2 years, we've started identifying the technology standards, the ISTE standards, which the state of Washington has adopted. We've been identifying which of those standards are embedded within what teachers are already doing in those core content areas. So our curriculum specialists at the secondary levels have met with their departments and said, tell us of these standards, what can you all say that you all are doing? Don't check every box just because lots of checks looks good, but boil it down to what you're really doing. And so we've been adding those into the course guide. We have them in there, I believe, for math, social studies, and science. And ELA went through an adoption last year. And so we're getting those into the course guide for this coming year, along with world language. So that's kind of your high school block. And then at elementary school, we went through an elementary STEM adoption last year that we'll be implementing this year. It is a modified implementation, but all of the 4th and 5th graders through that STEM adoption will be getting their block coding through BrainPop. We opted to not go forward at this time with the purchase of the programmable devices for the younger kids due to the COVID and budgeting and whatnot, but that's also probably on the table for the future. In addition, at the elementary level, all students meet with their librarian once a week, and the librarians have been working and have finalized their library scope and sequence, which we haven't had at the elementary level for quite some time. And within that scope and sequence, you can see where the ISTE standards are noted and addressed within that time that the librarian meets with the students. So at elementary school, we're meeting all students in several areas, and those areas will continue to grow as we roll out new adoptions. At middle school, I would anticipate that the TechSmart class that students are taking now would continue to be offered, along with all of the other technology electives that students have in middle school. I also strongly believe that our middle school core teachers are also teaching with technology and asking students to demonstrate their learning through technology just as much as our high school teachers are. We just don't have a nice way to capture that quite yet. But I do believe we're hitting all students, and then we're giving students choice to explore their interests further in technology. So I think the tech requirement had a place in time that was needed. And I think we're moving now from checking off a box that students have met a tech requirement to seeing really students demonstrate their tech proficiency in lots of areas as they do their regular studies.
Okay. So are there any questions from the board? Suzanne.
It's not really a question, it's just a comment. It was not that long ago that the board looked at our ends and said, gee, we have technology as this standalone end, like somehow it's more important than math and reading and science because it's its own thing. And we said, that doesn't make sense anymore. It might have made sense at one time, but now it should be just a sub-bullet of academics and foundations, along with all the many things that we teach our kids. And I think this conversation is just kind of following that. It's like, we're still teaching technology. It's embedded in everything we do. It's part of math, it's part of science, it's part of, everything else. It doesn't need to be its own major thing with its own major tests. So to me, this is just a logical extension of the conversation the board had a couple of years ago.
Okay. Anyone else? Harlan.
Can you just answer me the practical part now? So that means that TechSmart would probably go away in our middle schools. So what would replace it?
Harlan, I don't necessarily see it going away. Jason and I had a conversation about it last year. He really believes that students coming into middle school would still benefit from the TechSmart class. We have updated that curriculum so that it's not just learning about software, but they go through a little bit of coding. They have some video and digital design work that they do. So it's a little bit more than what our old kind of software tech class used to have. And students are learning how to use technology to maybe demonstrate learning in other classes as well. So I don't see the TechSmart class going away. It would still be maybe, Jason had said at the middle school, you know, they can kind of have these required electives that all students take. So I think that that's where he's leaning. We did, however, over the last several years, we added several CTE courses at the middle school that also met that tech requirement. So those classes would also remain. Those are more your CS discoveries, computer science discoveries classes, some of the middle school engineering classes, the project lead the way classes that are at the middle schools, they all met that tech requirement. And I don't see those going away just because the tech requirement went away. We might see that students kind of, you know, vote with their feet and they don't sign up with TechSmart anymore. And at that point, I think the schools would need to look and see what might be missing within their whole curriculum as an elective and bring in a new elective.
I guess that would be the key point. Are middle schoolers going to have a choice over the course, or will all middle schoolers have to take TechSmart? So I guess that's the point I want to clarify.
Yeah, I think that, Director Moore, I think that's the key question. If it stays as a class that we kind of mandate is part of the core curriculum for sixth graders or not, I think that's worthy of further conversation. If it becomes an option, I think then you have a situation where we may have to look at that class and maybe kind of rebrand it or change some of the content. Because kids may choose TechSmart, they may choose art, for example, right? So we may want to look at that. There's a lot of things in my head of what we can do with a tech elective. We can prep kids for future CTE classes because in the CTE classes begin in 7th grade on. So that's an option. I could see us wanting to maintain the 6th grade tech elective, but maybe add a more social emotional learning with that as far as awareness of social media concerns, and maybe go deeper into some of those opportunities as far as social emotional safety and how technology can impact students. So I think there's room here for us to kind of figure that out. The good news is being that it's still September, we really have until February when we would start putting out our course selection options. So, and also I think input from the board on what we see envision for those 6th graders, and what we, maybe input from the community as well, as far as keeping that class or not.
Yeah, and as I recall, when the software tech class was a high school class that met the tech requirement, there was still a tech class that students took in 6th grade when they entered 6th grade. So I think just like Jason is saying, we can leave it in 6th grade and then adjust it and adapt it with those teachers that teach it and with the community, and finding out what maybe isn't being met that could be met through this tech class.
I just think we need to have more options. Like which middle schools have Project Lead the Way? Because it's not Pine Lake.
Pine Lake, no, sorry, not Pine Lake. Maywood, IMS, and
Beaver Lake has some Project Lead the Way coding classes. PC has a coding course and tech electives, but it's not necessarily a Project Lead the Way trained staff member. So it's really IMS. Beaver Lake has some, and then Maywood are the primary Project Lead the Way schools right now.
Yeah, I mean, those are great courses, but I mean, if they're only for less than half of our student population, then that has limited utility. I just think the TechSmart class is pretty dated, having just had my child go through it last year. I mean, most of the skills they were already doing as part of just learning how to do project work in elementary school. So the new material or new exposure to utilizing technology, I think, was pretty limited.
Right. And the Project Lead the Way classes at our schools, they seem to be very popular with our student population. The tricky part for those classes, quite frankly, is not enough room. When we talk about students who want to select into the year-long music electives, it becomes difficult to access those Project Lead the Way courses at 7th and 8th grade. Maywood Middle School also has coding along with their automation and robotics and their design and modeling. And those are the classes that IMS has as well.
Other questions or thoughts? So I wanted to say a few things that came to mind. One is it's an overall philosophy of what is a graduation requirement? Why do we have it? What is the purpose for students? Many of the graduation requirements we have, well, most of them is because the state says, here's your graduation requirement. This is one that the state does not have a graduation requirement for technology. It's specific to our district. And what is the purpose? And I think if we look at when it was instituted, you know, kids didn't have a supercomputer in their hand, which compared to back in when I went to school, the thing that we carry around in our phone is way smarter than anything that would have been on a desktop back in the 80s. So the need for technology and technology concepts is less an issue of you need to have these and understand these things. You have to know how to use a PowerPoint before you go into the real world. It's less about those skills and more about what are the opportunities we can take that we want students to learn. And for some students, they want to dig deeper into technology. And for other students, what they learn through, like Harlan said, through the process of going through elementary school, doing projects, and they've learned a lot of those skills, or by the time they graduate, they will have seen those things. So I think it's really about what is a graduation requirement and why do we have it? What is our expectation that every single student learns? And I don't know that this one now meets the same need as I think 15 years ago, it was completely valid to say our system needs to keep up with where business is going, where our society is going. And I mean, we're finding now we're farther behind. A lot of the developments that we've had to do with working with families, working with our staff member is bringing us into the 21st century and those skills. So I think that for me, it was a necessary requirement at the time, and I don't know if it's needed now. The second piece that comes is most students meet their this graduation requirement in middle school. But we have, last year, if you look at the class of last year, nearly 11% of students came in after they started high school. So which meant that they then had to say, I want to choose this one elective, but I have to choose this other elective because I have to meet a graduation requirement that this district had that I didn't have in where I was coming from. And so it was either that or take a test, which right now, how are we going to mandate a test? So I think that, I just think that it feels like we're creating work that's maybe not necessary to meet a requirement that students likely already have the skill set for. And I'd rather open it up for them to either dig deeper into technology, if that's their pathway, that their interest, if that's their passion, or to say, I want to try the sample foreign language over here that I didn't get to take because I didn't get, my extra opportunity to do that until 8th grade. So I think it opens up kids to be able to do what it is that they're passionate about. And it gives one less requirement that inhibits that for them. And really, especially in middle school when they start to explore. And so they're 6th grade, there's very, very little opportunity for them to explore, especially if they go into any of the performing arts. They don't have any opportunity to explore anything beyond that. So this gives one more trimester that they'll have an opportunity to do it, find something new. So And with that, any more comments? Then I'll close discussion and we can take a vote. So all those in favor of the motion that's before us, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Or abstentions? Hearing none, the ayes have it. And now for staff, go and do.
Thank you very much. Very much appreciated. I agree with just about everything I heard you all just say, including President Moraldo, because I was here at the beginning, at the origins of that, and I think it was appropriate, and I advocated for it at the time. And I think you just made the right decision to change it and remove it as well. So thank you for that.
Thanks. Next on our agenda is EL 11 discipline. So this is an opportunity for us to monitor the executive limitation around discipline. So I will look for a motion.
I move the board accept the annual internal monitoring report for EL 11 discipline as presented.
Second. Oh, and I did miss something in the last agenda item. I did not see any public hands raised. I forgot to ask if anyone had any comments about that. If so, we will get to them when we do public comment for this item. Okay, so Superintendent.
Thank you, President Moraldo. You know, my only disappointment is I was anxious to have 300 people hear what I think is a very positive story, but apparently they had other plans and many have dropped off. And my other disappointment to this is that I didn't get a full year's worth of data out of last year, because the direction the data is heading is exactly the direction we want it to be going in. So I'm not going to talk too much about the report because I've made some updates. And I know the board has had it and read through it. There was a lot of updating to this report last year. You'll recall we put in a lot of we put in some new interpretations related to kind of the whole child more. We've added some additional evidence. The couple of areas that we did do some additional updating on this year was under the general interpretation bullet. We added a section that talks about kind of the psychological evaluations and risk assessment practices that we use. And then the other kind of addition there is under sub-bullet 3, permit any unruly behaviors to disrupt learning. We added a couple of sections, one on the universal screener and one on the Swiss school-wide information system behavior tracking process. Those are new additions in the report. But what is really exciting about the report to me is in the data tables, because even though, and I'm going to have Dr. Almy speak to this in a moment, we had to do some calculating on what we believe the numbers would have looked like had we had the last 12 weeks of the school year. So we were able to look back at some historical data and get a fairly good sense that it probably would increase the numbers that you see on those charts by approximately a third or 30%. But just the highlights, and again, I'm going to have Dr. Almy talk to some of this, but again, the trend lines for discipline are going down. And I believe there's been a lot of really good work on the part of staff to understand the importance of keeping kids in school. And so trying to, find alternative ways to help students. And more importantly, too, some of the opportunity gaps that we have seen in this data historically are narrowing, and that's something that I'm really pleased with. What do I mean by that? As an example, in 3 years ago, or 4 school years back now, 2017, 2018, our African American students were 1.89% of our total population, yet they represented 7.75% of our suspensions. So they were overrepresented by nearly 4 times what their population was in our system. The following year, they were 1.93 and had dropped to 6.26% of our suspensions. So it had dropped down closer to 3 times overrepresented. Still, nothing to be proud of there. I mean, we are still suspending those students at a much higher rate than their population number in our schools would indicate we should be. Last year, and again, we've done some math to extrapolate what this would look like going forward, but it looks as though we would have landed somewhere 1.97% of our population and just under 4% of our suspension. So we've halved it almost. We've gone from 4% of or 4 times the representation down to 2 times. So that is a trend line that I'm very, very happy about. It holds up with some other categories as well. So, and I'm gonna, again, have Dr. Almy speak to that. And then one other thing, and I know he'll mention some numbers related to this as well, 2 areas in our equity work as it related to discipline that we were focused on and have had conversations and done some training around were the areas of failure to cooperate and disruptive conduct. And the reason we focused on those is through our training, through our learning, we came to understand that sometimes that was a misinterpretation on the part of the teacher, depending like a cultural misinterpretation. And you'll see there in the charts, those categories of suspension and discipline have steadily gone down as well and are much lower numbers than they were. So I'm encouraged by this. I'm truly encouraged by this. And this was the report that really kicked off a lot of our equity work a number of years ago when we were asked to disaggregate this data and peel back the layers of the onion, if you will. And that started us on equity work. It also, our state has done a lot on discipline work and the laws have changed. And collectively what you see is you see fewer suspensions, shorter durations, and less overrepresentation, if you will, of certain populations in our discipline data. That is a good news story. I'm very proud of the work that the staff have done, and we want to keep that going in those trends in that direction. Josh, could you speak specifically to some of the numbers that we're talking about and how we calculated in to try to get a clearer picture given what happened last year?
Absolutely. Thank you, Superintendent Thiele. And before I jump into some of the numbers, I just want to say that this has been a huge priority for us. And there are so many departments that work together collaboratively with buildings to try to get it right and to try to continually improve in this area. Can't say enough about the work that Dr. Bailey has done and teaming with our ed directors, as well as Executive Director Siva-Dawson, our TLS department, our student interventions team. It's really been a team effort. One thing that Superintendent Thiele and I talked about over the past month when we started putting this data together was looking at both in-school suspensions and out-of-school suspensions and seeing what that trend line was over the 3-year period. And when we look at in-school suspensions starting 3 years ago in 17-18, and I'm just talking 6-12 right now because I think that that's where a lot of our suspensions had been in the past. In 17-18, we had 411 in-school suspensions in grades 6 through 12. In 18-19, we had 378. And then in 19-20, which was last year, and then when we got a full year projection with 32 additional % in there, and we had a few different metrics that we looked at and tried to come up with the best number that we could come up with based on the numbers that we had through mid-March. We had 200 in-school suspensions, and that's a 47% drop from 2018-19 to 2019-20. Now, I thought when we first pulled that data and started looking at it, I thought to myself, well, I hope we're not going to see an upswing in out-of-school suspensions. So then we went to the out-of-school suspensions on a 3-year trend. In 2017-18, we had 269 out-of-school suspensions for grades 6 through 12. In 2018-19, we had 257 out-of-school suspensions. In 2019-20, with our full year projection, the best we could do, we came up with 179. That's a 30% decrease from 2018-19 to 2019-20. Why do I think that? well, we've seen those decreases in both in-school suspensions and out-of-school suspensions. I think there's a lot of reasons, but one thing that I would point to is last year was also and there was 2 years of prep going into last year, but we went to system-wide K-12, our multi-tiered system of support for discipline, and using the Swiss data collection system, K-12, in all of our buildings. When these issues started to happen in our buildings, they were brought to tier 2 teams. Quickly, we were getting interventions to students quicker than we ever had before. And quickly, we were reassigning resources to places that we needed. If, for example, if we're at a middle school and we see that under the play area that we're having a lot of issues there and it's pulling up in our tier 2 teams in late September, we put extra paraprofessionals and extra supervision in those areas. So we were able to, with that multi-tiered system of support, get resources in places that we needed them quicker and get interventions to students quicker. So those 3-year trends with both in-school and out-of-school suspensions, I thought were a celebration and really great data. Another thing that we pulled apart was we wanted to look at 2 specific areas, which were the area of failure to comply and the area of disruptive behavior. And I pulled data on 3-year trends just for in-school suspensions for those 2 areas. And one little piece of data that I found there, and if you combine the in-school suspensions for both failure to comply and for disruptive behavior in 2018 and 19, we had 121 in-school suspensions, 612. And in 2019-20, when we did our full year projection, we had 31. And that was almost a 75% decrease in those 2 areas. And again, I go back to our multi-tiered system of support. That was the first year that we did it system-wide. We relied heavily on the Swiss behavior system to fuel those tier 2 teams. And I would also say, I can't speak enough about the ongoing training that we've done around cultural competency and social justice. I think that that's been so important. Our principals, our teachers, they're continually asking for more. We're bringing in Ashley McGritt, internationally known speaker on social justice, to our All-Admin team next month. And this is a journey that will continue on. We will continue to get better at it. We've got a long ways to go. One last piece to mention that Ron had talked about the significant decrease with our African-American students and how their overrepresentation in discipline. I also want to talk about the strides that we've made with our students in our special education program, because there's a celebration there as well. About 8.4% of our students in the Issaquah School District are on an IEP. In 2017-18, they made up 8.5% of our suspensions. In 18-19, they again made up 8.5% of our suspensions. In 2019-20, with the projection, the full year projection, they made up just under 4% of our suspensions. So that number was cut in half as far as the percentage of students on IEPs who are being suspended. Again, we still have work to do in that area. I do believe that our multi-tiered system of support on the behavior end has had a lot to do with it. It's just been one factor, but that was the first year, last year, that was implemented system-wide. Had about 2 years planning going into that. It took a lot of time to get the system up to scale to be able to launch that. Our plan was to launch our MTSS system sooner than we're going to be able to. Remote learning has slowed that down a little bit. We're continuing to do that work remotely and working with our consulting group in California to launch MTSS on the academic side. When we go to conferences and whatnot and talk about what we are doing with multi-tiered systems of support and behavior, there are very few districts that I see that are ahead of us. There's a few, and we're trying to learn from them as much as we can. But it's a system that's working, and we're able to get interventions to students quicker, and we're able to get our hands on data even quicker than we could in the past. So we still have a lot of work to do in this area on EL11. We're going to keep doing it, but I think I speak for Superintendent Thiele is that there were definitely some celebrations in this data when we put it together this last month.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Almi. I will say, our data is flat with our Hispanic or Latinx population. We know where we've got more work to do. And it's also relatively flat with our low income students as well. So, but people have really embraced the vision of changing the way discipline is done. And it's encouraging to me to see some positive results from that work. You know, you work really hard, and if sometimes you don't get those results, it's not magic, and it can be a little defeating. So this felt good to be able to look at that data and see real growth over time. Was encouraging. So I just appreciate the work that everybody has done. And again, like I said, the biggest disappointment was we didn't get a clean set of data because of the COVID shutdown last year. But we think that those numbers, they were, I mean, I wasn't going to bring you the numbers as they were because they look spectacular, but we recognize that was minus 12 weeks at the end of the year. So we had to be fair as we did an analysis there. And we'll just take any questions at this time, Director Maraldo. Marnie, you're muted right now.
Mike, I'm going to take public comment first. I forgot to do it on the last one because I want to hear what the public says before I start asking questions of the board. So I have two people that have raised their hands. So I will start with Tiffany Henry. We're still going to do, because we're running 2 hours behind, I'm still going to do 2 minutes on this topic. But if you would like to speak to this topic, you are welcome to. Let me unmute you. And then I think you can unmute on your side.
Thank you. And I'm speaking from an elementary standpoint. I know that Mr. Almy had spoken specifically from a middle school standpoint. I had some specific situations, and I know I'm not the only elementary teacher that have had this situation with a student that is specifically LRC1 and does not have a specifically assigned para. But when we have a disruption to the classroom with an LRC1 student, especially if they're ODD or something with a suspected diagnosis or official diagnosis, removing them from a classroom can be a bit of a challenge. And so speaking towards those numbers of suspension doesn't really apply to me. But my concern is that those numbers are not being tracked in SWIS. And with SWIS for an elementary teacher, we're being asked to put in numbers specifically for each instance. With the students that are ODD, especially in an elementary setting, that is, I'll be honest and say it's almost unrealistic per circumstance because they happen so often. And so that's just something I want the board to consider as, you know, something that is a reality with SWIS. I'm not saying that SWIS is the problem. I'm just maybe saying making it more efficient to report those instances, maybe in a streamlined way, might be a little bit more efficient and helpful for elementary teachers especially. Because right now it's per instance, and let's say that instance happens, I don't know, 15 times in 20 minutes. I realistically can't do that and still teach my class in person, or for that matter, virtually. So I would just like that at some point just thought about and addressed.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Next I have Jennifer Bland. Jennifer Bland, your hand is raised to speak to this issue. If you're not interested, you can lower your hand. And last call. Jennifer Bland, would you like to speak to this issue? Okay, with that, we'll move to questions from the board or comments.
I had to remember my question, sorry. I love this update, and I think, as I've said before, this is actually the topic that brought me into this process and my interest in getting involved in the school board. So I think that being able to look at the discipline data is really important, as well as looking at the trends over time. I think the thing that was interesting, Dr. Almy, and what you're saying is in the multi-tiers of support approach, that we're able to pinpoint and send more resources to a particular area. And I guess my question is that a per school response, or is that something where we may see that there's an adjustment that may need to be made in every elementary school or in every middle school? How does that, that response, is that something that gets applied in more than one school when an insight like that is located?
Yeah, and I'm going to ask Executive Director Morse to jump in here too in just a second. But last year when we got the feedback from buildings that were using Swiss to reallocate resources that they were seeing that were popping up on their tier 2 teams, that was happening at a building level. That was principals and assistant principals and building leadership teams. They were making those decisions based on that data that was happening in their building. And Jason, you and I just had a discussion about this yesterday, I think. So if you want to chime in on that as well.
Yeah. First of all, Director Mullins, thanks for the question. It's really insightful because it gets to the systems approach for our entire organization. The experience I have in working with buildings in Swiss and what the data tells us typically is more of a building by building specific approach or remedy to some sort of uptick that we might notice in the data. So the specific example that Dr. Almy and I were speaking of is one of our middle schools was noticing lunchtime and some kind of unstructured time, sports court time was popping up on the Swiss reports frequently. And so there's a couple of approaches that are able to be taken. Typically, that may be more of a restructuring of resources within the building. So it's not, the experiences I have aren't necessarily, addition of staff. It's typically more of an adjustment at the building level for how we leverage those staff. And that can come in the form of our coaches, our certificated staff, our admin staff. In the building I'm thinking of, our admin staff really paired up with our classified staff to really make some changes that I think really helped move the dial on this data. Additionally, what that does is it's not just about our human resources, it provides input on actions we can take. So it's not always about putting more human resources on it. It's maybe being more strategic about how we leverage those. So that will maybe tell our PBSES teams at the building that, hey, we need to spend some more time focusing on teaching expected behaviors, either at lunch or through our SEL, social emotional learning time. So sometimes and quite frankly, many times it's more about the adult behavior and how that can influence or put students in a position to be better successful. So that's kind of where my examples come from. As far as a systemic level, I think if we saw trends across a district, we would hopefully add those resources. I think that is case in point of our PBSES staff.
I would add that for the most part, I would concur with Dr. Almy and Executive Director Morse that, usually it's building specific, really taking that information and working with their teams and looking at where they might need to add additional supports. However, I have to say at the elementary level, oftentimes we do that as a group, looking at our Swiss data reports and having conversations. And what we've seen typically is in the spring across all buildings at the elementary level, behaviors begin to spike, so then that leads to conversations where we can share ideas. What are we doing proactively following February break? Because that's when it starts to as soon as they come back, start reteaching school-wide expectations. Maybe we have some positive incentive coupons and we up that a little bit and start looking for positive behaviors we can label and as we see appropriate behavior. So I think there are opportunities to look system-wide as well and see trends.
Any other questions or comments from the board? Anne.
I'll just make a quick comment. Marty and I had the opportunity while we were doing our Board of Distinction essay and research and work to meet with Pam Ridenour and Callie Greenfield, I think if I have that right. And it was really interesting to delve into understanding more about MTSS and Swiss and the work that's going on. And it definitely seems to be producing good results for us. So I'm very pleased to hear that and see this connection to our discipline data. So good work to all.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it really is the equity work come to the classroom and come to fruition when we really start talking about what is the root cause of a student's behavior. Because a lot of times, you know, if you have a student that's ripping up their homework, is that because they're being defiant, or is that because they're really confused about the assignment, or they got stuck somewhere and they don't want to turn in something incomplete in there? So it's going to what's the root cause. And I think I appreciate that the district has taken the time to really work with our teachers, that our teachers are getting, what I heard even tonight was it's about relationship. And I think that part of this MTSS work and the equity work has been it's about relationships with students. And when you build that relationship with students, they want to be successful. They want to please their teacher, right? They want to know that they can do it. And when teachers are supporting and nurturing that piece of belief in the student, I think it appears and it shows up in then their actions. I would say one of the things, I thought I had mentioned this last year, so it's kind of me not going back and saying, hey, I wanted this data. There is one form that you have, let me see if I can find it, on page 4, and it's called, it's under the OSBI exclusion rates, number of students excluded over time. I think that's the one. Oh no, I'm sorry, it's above that. Suspensions by race, 3-year trend OSPI. Even though it says OSPI, you've actually taken that data and put it in a nice Excel spreadsheet for us. But the one column that is missing is what percentage of students. So you have the percentage of students with suspensions by race, and it's broken out that says, okay, if I were to look at 2018, I'll do that because it's right in the middle. 17.78% of overall suspensions were Latino students. What it doesn't tell me is that actually 4.9% of Latino students end up getting suspended. So you might be able to see how the number is different. And because sometimes the other numbers is like, what percentage of makeup are they is a different one. Than I want to know what's the overall experience for our Hispanic community. And we're finding that nearly 5% of them are suspended at some point over the year. Whereas if I look at our Caucasian students, 2.4% of them are getting expelled over the year. So you are twice as likely, if you are Latino, to be suspended. And so I think that's an important measurement. Now, what the thing that is encouraging, and it's based off the numbers that are in here. So I know that Josh, you guys had worked to kind of expand what if it had been for the whole year, but 2% of Latinos were expelled, or not expelled, suspended last year, from nearly 5% in 1 year. Now, mind you, we didn't have the last 12 weeks, but still the experience of students, only 2% of Latino students experienced being suspended last year. And that's a significant drop. The same with our African-American students went from 7.6% of African-American students in 2018-19 experienced being suspended. That dropped to 2.1%. which is still twice as more likely than white students, but it's not nearly where it was at the previous year. So I think if we can add that column that says the percentage of those students that experience suspensions is also a key piece of data for me. But yeah, I'm anxious to have a year where students are with us with MTSS in place to really know how it's impacting their experiences. But if I can see a drop in half as many students experience suspensions as they did last year, regardless of what ethnic background, their race background. That's a win. That's a win when we see it dropping, and when we see it dropping across the board for students. So, Jason.
Director Moraldo, I wanted to maybe circle back to Director Mulling's question kind of about the building interventions versus the district interventions. And I just did want to circle back and kind of reemphasize that kind of district-wide interventions, the addition of staff, the PBSES coaches, for example, the staff in Pam Ridenour's department that are leading the PBSES initiatives. There's a tremendous amount of training that goes on with our building staff. And I think, our equity department as an example as well. I think that's where you're seeing those global 10,000 foot investments that are pushed into the building with those new positions. For example, full-time PBSES at elementary, right? Those kinds of things, I think, is a matter of kind of supplying the buildings with what they need, training and the resources, and then the buildings to Assistant Superintendent Bongard's point, are able to kind of work together to compare experiences, but also work individually depending on kind of the specific need of the campus. I know at my level, some of my campuses have unique features about them that create spots that require additional supervision. So I think I'm hoping that we circled back to finish your question of kind of the 10,000 foot and the building kind of intervention. So.
Great. Okay, any other questions or comments? Suzanne.
Yeah, when this isn't a question, but when I was reading this, something back in the cobwebs of my brain took us back to last year. And I remember we had a conversation where the language of the EL talks about consistent enforcement of discipline. And we talked about how maybe that should read equitable enforcement of discipline. And I don't know if there's any room left in the retreat agenda, but that might be something that we wanted to look at, because we talked about it last year and then apparently we promptly forgot.
I'll add that to my EL list.
Sorry.
We had that note as well, Director Weaver, but I was going to let you all decide if you wanted to do that work or not. But
well, it's board work. It's not district work. It's
we captured it though here for you, and you're right. It was the word equitable. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. I captured that on my long list that I still have not typed up and sent to Superintendent Thiele.
President Moraldo, I do believe there was a request for public input that we couldn't get unmuted. So Jennifer Bland, I know, still has her hand up, and I don't know if we needed to unmute her or she was having a problem on her side, but I believe that there is some public input. I'm not even sure if it's on this agenda item or on the previous one. But if I just wanted you to be aware that she was still hoping to give public input there.
Okay, so Ms. Bland, I have unmuted you on my side, but you will have to be able to allow your camera. And I don't know, Stephen, maybe you could help.
It says the host has stopped it.
Oh.
Yeah, and that's what happened before. It wouldn't allow me to unmute. I was pushing the button repeatedly.
Okay.
Okay, now it says I can.
Okay, great.
There we go. Okay, hi there. I am Jennifer Bland. I'm a first grade teacher at Sunset Elementary. And I even was working with the technology pieces to see if I could say it wouldn't unmute, and I was going to make that picture. So here we go. The Swiss data, I'm concerned that the Swiss data is not an accurate representation of the behavior issues that some of us in the elementary schools are experiencing, not just at Sunset, but I've spoken to teachers at some other buildings as well. And what happens with Swiss is you wait till you have a moment to be able to input it. So then you go and you go to input it, and somebody has an emergency, a bathroom emergency, you step to the side, you go back and you go, ooh, did I actually push submit or not? We have no way as educators to go into Swiss to check and see if our data actually got put in correctly. We also, it does not help inform our practices at all. I can't look and see that, oh, Johnny had a problem every other Monday. well, maybe Johnny goes to a different home on the weekends. I can't look at any of that myself to have that help inform my practice. So I think there are a lot of teachers who kind of gave up on putting stuff in Swiss because it was so difficult for us to be able to check, and it was about as opaque as possible. And I know that we as educators want things to be very transparent, and it should be transparent, and it's not an accurate representation of the behaviors that we're seeing. Even at first grade, I teach everybody from whatever level they can read to, you know, whatever. I have children who are reading at pre-K. I have children who are reading at third grade. We have behaviors all over that gamut as well. And we are working with a lot of children who probably have undiagnosed issues that are not being supported or helped with. And I can think of quickly like 4 times within like a week where we had to go into lockdown in our building because a student was out of control, and the staff who are trained in right response were doing what they're supposed to do. But in doing that, it becomes very disruptive. We have to bring in parent volunteers from the hallway who can no longer work in the hallway because of safety. We can't take the children out the regular front doors of the school because there's a child who's having special needs. And we're kind of at a loss at when I hear how great it is that we're not suspending anybody. I think, well, wait, it went down? How could it have gone down? We had kids dumping desks, throwing chairs, and this isn't my first rodeo. I started teaching 32 years ago. One of my first graders is now a principal at another elementary. So I've been doing this a while, and during that time, I can probably count in the past 32 years, only maybe less than 5 times, maybe 3 times where I ever needed help from the office with a student. And that was very different last year. It was really a hotbed at more than just our elementary. And our principal was doing everything she could do. I am not throwing her under the bus whatsoever. She was trying so hard to make sure that we had the support we needed, but I don't know if there's a language thing that got left out. In
2 minutes.
Lines. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks for listening.
Okay. Any other questions or comments from the board or staff? No? Okay, so with that, we have a motion before us. So all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, the ayes have it and the motion is passed. Thank you for that work. Next on our list is capital projects. I don't know if Executive Director Mullings has stayed on the extra 15 hours that we asked him since this meeting started.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Good evening, everyone. I'm going to push share screen.
No pressure, Tom. You only have 2 hours to make up.
We'll make this quick.
I hope our project chart is more accurate than the agenda.
Our host has disabled participant screen.
Let me see if I can
that's
figure
me,
that
Tom.
out.
It should be ready now.
There we go. Good evening, everyone. We'll get started. Go straight with elementary 16. Footings, foundations, underground utilities are in. Everything's going well. The large underground vault, which on our more recent projects have been one of the key components, is done, being backfilled. Good portion of the main drive's in, and still working with City of Sammamish on the road frontage improvements. This is a picture of the site. As you can see, it was in the rain. Let's see here. There's the large storm vault, the lid of it, the driveway going past it. This is one of the large retaining walls that's going in. Middle school 6, another one of our sites that has some challenges to the dirt. It's if you ever get a chance to swing by the site, we'd love to take you for a tour. It's quite a sight to be seen. This is the admin area. This is the area you would enter the front of the building from. This is the admin. This large wall here drops down to the gym and aux gym at this level. We'll show you the next one is, this is that bottom level. This will be the field that goes out here. The large storm vault that was is now completed and covered is right out in this corner. This next photo was to try to show you from a perspective of the layering, tiering of the site. This up on top is the bus level loop. You drop down, I think 20 plus feet, you're at the parent drop-off loop, which will come out, have a turnaround similar to this one up here. This level down here is the field level, but it still has another 15 plus feet to go down. And this process they're doing right here is a shotcreting where they dig down, spray, dig down further. It's quite a process to see. This is the bus turnaround, the end of the loop up here. These green pipes are going to support the guardrails that'll go around. This wall is what we call an MSC wall. It is literally bags of a particular kind of dirt packed together and stacked, and then it'll have a concrete sculpted front that goes up in front of it. High school number 4, the scheduled submittal for the STP application MSP is tomorrow. I wanted to let everyone know that it was delayed in an attempt to leverage the information we got from the city council at the city council study session. And we brought it into a meeting we had earlier this week with city staff. We got as far as we felt we could with that, and the submittal will go in tomorrow. I know we had talked about it being in at least a week ago, but we felt leveraging a little extra time to get a little further on our application, information for our application would be worth it. And the design team is continuing to work on the design and work with the city. Maple Hills painted, we're in for permit and things are going well. We're hoping to start in the spring there. Beaver Lake, hopefully everybody's got by to see it by now. It's quite a dramatic change. It's looking very good, sharp, and we're in with the city of Sammamish in discussions and working on getting permits ready to put in for there and hopefully start summer 2021. Liberty High School, this is the concessions building and new restroom building. Struggling a little to get out of the dirt and get some concrete. The economy is so busy right now that the smaller projects are struggling to get particularly concrete. So they're running a little behind there, but they feel they can make up the time. And Issaquah Heights Stadium improvements, we're looking to going in for permits in November and get that project started in the spring. Depending on how long it takes the city to permit, and get started on that one in the spring. Any questions on that portion of the update? I have some other things I can show also.
Interesting, when you were talking about the Liberty Stadium, I was thinking in my head, my son, who's now 21, was a freshman in high school when we started the whole Liberty project. But then you pulled up the Issaquah High and I thought, well, I think Ann's children were still in high school when we started the Issaquah project.
Yes, Jake reminds me of that. The permitting schedule. The projects have stayed basically the same since last month. And we've added a little bit of information for the high school stadium is firming up, as is Beaver Lake. So there's a slight change there, but nothing too drastic. And then Director Gallinger wanted to see some progress photos from aerial shots. So we pulled together everything we had. We worked with the contractor, is the one that actually does the aerial photos. And we put some progressions together, some more drastic than others. I'm not sure how well you'll be able to see them on your screens. This is elementary 16. Since we don't have a pre-construction aerial shot, we used King County's or Google or Bing. They all have the same type of thing. I can tell this is King County because it has the boundary of the property outlined. There is July of this year where they just started getting dirt moved good, getting some cuts done. You can see over here the storm vault is being formed. Grading of the site. This is Jacobs Creek condominiums over here. This is Issaquah Pine Lake Road, Klahani entrance, the entrance to the Jacobs Creek across the bridge there. Slightly different perspective. Storm vault continuing on. This is from August. This is a little over a month ago. Storm vault being well formed. The driveway comes around here, main drive, which will come up, circle around. You can see footings and foundations going in. Definitely the storm vault's further along. This was the first of this month. I think this is the last photo we'll have. We'll get another one in another week or so, and we'll be ready for the next update. The building footings and foundations are in. They now have all the slabs poured and everything and all the underground utilities in. This is the vault that's complete. They've cut the driveway in better, comes up around here. And Issaquah Pine Lake Road for reference. And then we did the same type of thing for middle school 6. Again, a aerial photo, and this was the site as it was left to us by the previous developer. It was used for parking and construction access when they built this Timberlake, and in particular this for this end portion that they added on last. Talus Drive, SR 900. Not much going on. You can see we've just started in March. We put up some construction TESC fencing. There's a crane on site. Started moving some dirt in May. A little more activity. Hard to tell, but quite a bit more activity has happened at this point. They've got a road cut in here for the bus loop, and they've started punching in roads and forming the storm vault. And then this is July, and a lot more going on. The August photo shows the bus lane being what we call ATB. This would be the bus turnaround that we saw, the loop in the last photo that was so large. This is the parent loop that comes along here. And then this is that wall that the picture was taken where we had the notations of the different levels. This is the storm vault. This all needs to come down. This entire area in here from this picture, about another 20, 25 feet of excavation down to get about 3 feet higher than the top of this vault right here. Footings and foundations and stem walls going in for the project. This would be the gym area right in here. Any questions concerning capital projects?
No, thanks, Tom, and for putting those aerials together too. Appreciate that.
Absolutely.
Harlan.
I just want to say thank you for the aerials. I think it's really helpful. You know, both our city councils are very concerned about the impact to trees, and I know that there was a lot of tree mitigation for the Issaquah Pine Lake elementary site. So
yep,
for letting us be able to see it, definitely looks different than when we walked it.
Absolutely. My pleasure. Anything else?
Okay, I'm not seeing anyone else raising their hand, so thank you so much. I appreciate, especially hearing that our delay to allow the city council to meet in Issaquah was helpful in discussions that you had with the city afterwards. So I do appreciate that that happened, because you know, you never know, was it worth it to delays? But it sounded to me like hearing from them was an important step in the process. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Have a good evening, everyone.
Thank you. And thank you for waiting 2 hours.
Not a problem.
Okay, next on our agenda is legislative matters. Harlan, tell us what a good time we're having tomorrow.
I think given this late hour, I think we should just skip this.
Okay.
Marnie and I will be spending all day on General Assembly. So if you guys want to join us, you can.
Yeah.
We talked about the, thanks, Suzanne. We talked about the prioritization. So I think we have a good idea of how you want us to prioritize those things. So we will report back on that in our next meeting.
Okay.
And I am behind on getting reach out to our legislators, but I still will do that.
Okay, great. Thank you. So Superintendent Thiele, works in progress. Is there anything else that we missed that we need to know?
I'll be really quick. I did want to let people, the board know that the Dyslexia Parent Engagement Group is coming back together on November 5th. So Rich and his team, that work is continuing forward. I heard some really positive comments about that work from a parent. And I think you heard it as well, Director Moraldo, during the foundation board meeting Tuesday night. So that was encouraging. I shared with the board, but just a reminder, we've expanded our meal distribution services. Last week, we delivered nearly 4,500 meals. We will be expanding to 4 more additional sites and delivering 10 meals at a time as opposed to 5 per student. So our food service workers continue to step up and really, I think, do a wonderful job during this pandemic to make sure that those families in most need were getting food out there. So I'm encouraged by that. Here's kind of an exciting announcement. We have a high school graduation date for our comprehensive high schools, and we do have T-Mobile Park booked. I'm good. Fingers are crossed. I mean, if there's ever going to be a possibility that we could do something like that, but we do have the stadium booked. It is June 11th is our date for Skyline, Issaquah High, and Liberty. And actually on June 10th, the day before, for Gibson Eck at Maidenbower. Again, that's all subject to what will be happening with the spread of the virus and everything, but we remain optimistic that maybe we'll be able to do that. And then I just wanted to note that prior to this meeting today, I was in meetings with 3/5 of the board. President Moraldo and I were in a preparation meeting with Director of Student Interventions, Pam Ridenour, and a number of our student intervention staff, a couple of our Swedish mental health school-based counselors, PBSES coach, is we are preparing for a presentation that we're going to be giving that is sponsored by the Y related to mental health issues in the Issaquah School District and how we are supporting mental health. And that event will be a virtual event, 7 p.m. Wednesday, October 15th. And President Moraldo is going to kind of be the MC of that event and guide us through it. And ISD staff will be sharing the work that we've been doing. And then just prior to this meeting, appreciate Director Weaver and Director Moore doing our annual inter-district student council meeting. Executive Director Hood organized that for us. And we got to meet with a large group of really outstanding high school students and talk about what we all do on this second and fourth Tuesday or Thursday of every month during board meetings. And we look forward to having students join the board and talked about a lot of the things that you talked about at your last work study too as well. So appreciate the efforts. I just want to make sure that the public understands you are also involved in so many things. It's not just these 2 meetings a month that you're out there participating in. So thank you for all that work. And we've been doing a little bit of planning work too for some in-person learning to happen, but that's just like a side thing.
And I'm going to consider this a works in progress, but I'd like to thank Anne specifically for reminding me on Monday, don't forget to turn in the Board of Distinction Award. That I was completely, it wasn't due till the next day, but there was no guarantee. So thank you, Anne. And thank you to everybody for your hard work writing those essays and putting that data together, and for staff that helped us get data that we needed. I know Anne and I got quite a bit of staff support. So we'll see. It's out there in the ether. So we'll find out. Will we continue to be a board of distinction? This will be our 11th year if it's true. So thank you for all of that. Next on our agenda is announcements and correspondence. And all the correspondence that came in, some came in today between this morning and the meeting. And I think that that Diane will update the agenda with all of that before it gets put into our meeting minutes for us to approve next time. But I did not receive anything outside of that. Did anyone else? Okay. Then next, so and Ron just announced the big piece, which is in a couple of weeks on October. What date was that? The 15th?
15th. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the mental health panel. And so I will be the moderator for that, but you are welcome to join. I think it's a key conversation that our students are dealing with their mental health issues and kind of in hiding now. So with them being not in the school, being able to have conversations with how to deal with that. Calendar and future agenda topics. And I have to move to look over here. Diane sent a list, actually, maybe if I can look it on my phone, of things that we need to calendar. And I have to find it. Calendar items. So to schedule agenda planning for Harlan and I think, were you able to respond to her email, Harlan? So we have the 28th in the afternoon, which is Monday, and that's a no. Tuesday, 8:30 to 11, which I'm available anytime during that. And then Wednesday, I'm not available until around 11 o'clock, but anything after 11 a.m. And you're muted.
It's gonna have to be Monday afternoon.
Monday afternoon? Okay, and what time will work for you?
Probably 3 o'clock or later.
3 or earlier?
Later, or 3 or later.
Oh, 3 or later. So Ron, what's on your schedule?
I can look right now. I'm good. Somebody really smart put a hold on my schedule during that time frame.
Okay, so how about then we do 3? Okay.
I'll send you a calendar invite.
Perfect. Oh, now I have to go back to what other things we're supposed to do. And then some scheduled meetings that are coming up. The General Assembly is tomorrow. Good times will be had by all. One thing down here is a director area Zoom meeting, regional meeting on Monday, October 5th. So this is again before we meet again. So October 5th from 6 to 7 p.m. And you can go to the WASDA site. I think some emails were sent out and you can click to register yourself. I don't know if Diane was doing that or if I registered myself.
I can go ahead and register everyone. I think the WASDA will be registering Harlan, but I'll register Anne, Sydney, and Suzanne.
Okay.
Thank you.
So that's October 5th. And then we still have our WASDA virtual conference.
I was going to say, back to the WASDA regional, I think I can go. So is there a cost to this? Okay. I may have an issue. I have to do something in the afternoon. I don't know how long it's going to go, but I will try.
Okay.
The format is the first hour is going to essentially be like everyone in the state's getting the same sort of like almost recorded updates, and then we're going to break out as a county for the second part. So even if you join the second part, that's where it's the more interactive networking.
So Harlan, it's only listed
It's
as
only an
going from
hour.
6 to 7 for 1 hour. So if 1 hour is pre-recorded, they're not even listing the second hour.
Yeah, it's supposed to come out as a separate invite. We have to do a separate link in order for us to use breakout rooms. So I didn't realize those announcements didn't come out together. Thanks. That's good to know.
Okay, but it's really meant to be more like from 6 to 8.
Yes.
Okay, that's what I need to know. Thank you.
Great. So the virtual annual conference, and I think that Diane sent, was it Diane or was it Waza? But I think that, we can go ahead and sign up. It's non-refundable because you can access it all year long. But that the regular sessions are going to be November 19th through the 21st. There's also a law conference on the 18th, board boot camp, or leading for equity. So those are three things that are running during that time on the 18th, if you'd like to pick one. We won't have any new board members. Diane.
I just had a question for Sydney. Sydney, did you want to do any of the pre-conference sessions?
Pre-conference is the 18th.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I was just looking at. I won't be able to do that.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Diane also wanted to share that there is a town hall that is pre-recorded that is tentatively scheduled to air on October 6th. And then finally, what I wanted to mention is we have a board retreat coming up on October 12th and 13th from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Location to be determined by whether or not the governor allows us to meet in person. So now that we're on that subject, does anyone have anything to say about that? Harlan, you're muted.
I said 2 days ago, he released guidance for being able to host meetings. So since it's not one of our formal board meetings, like we can certainly have meetings.
Okay.
What was the new guidance the governor gave out? I don't know about it.
Yeah, you have to it's weird because they didn't actually put it on the Safe Start website. That one will say the last update was September 21st. On September 22nd, he released guidance on being able to host events at event centers and conference rooms. And so basically not for like receptions and parties, but for business meetings. So.
And what, is there a limit to how many people? What was it that he's allowing?
It's a 25% of the room capacity.
Okay.
So we can have our board retreat in our boardroom.
Mm-hmm.
And because I think that even 25% of capacity, if there were any members of the public that would want to join us for 8 hours on a weekday, socially distanced from us and each other.
I would just recommend setting it up like we do for the big feeder pattern sit.
Mm-hmm.
Just so there's lots of space for when staff come in.
Right.
Like one person to a table. I'm planning for a work meeting for our annual meeting, and there's essentially one person per table set up that.
Yeah, I think that would be great. I think with it being our retreat, being able to have that in-person conversations, I think is really vital for us to move forward. So if there's not any objections, if you have objections, please let me know. But if there's not, I think we would have a more robust conversation during those 2 days if we were in person.
Well, and we can absolutely set it up safely in terms of we've got lots of room, lots of tables, space, hand sanitizing. So we'll do what we need to do to make the room be COVID ready, if you will, if the board chooses to come in person.
Okay. Well, hearing no objections, I think we'll begin planning then in that area. I have not set up the agendas yet, but I think I shared last time the things that were on my agenda. And I think we talked about a few extra that I jotted down. So I promise I will get this to staff by the time that Harlan and I meet with them on Monday. They will have that agenda. And
oh, I was gonna say, if you're done with that one, sorry, I was trying to catch you at the end.
no, go ahead.
Okay, I just wanted to mention that Suzanne and I, as Ron mentioned, did meet with the student representatives, and we're now trying to do this board mentor to each of the high schools so that we have a tighter connection with them and the students that we're going to have in. And so what we'd ultimately need are people, board members, to volunteer. So we need 4 to volunteer to be that mentor with each of the high schools. Since I was kind of getting this started, I was going to volunteer to do Issaquah, which is the first set of students that will be coming in, and take care of them through, I guess, October into November. I have to go look at the dates, but I don't know if we have others that would like to volunteer for the other 3 schools. And then I can share what I'm doing for Issaquah so that we can do that for the other schools and refine it as we go, because we may learn some things work better than others, and I'm open to just figuring that out over the year.
I'm happy to.
What, Sydney?
I said I'm happy to.
Okay, good. Anybody want to take a stab at which school they want besides Issaquah?
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to do it as well, but you know, I don't want to pick a favorite high school. I'll do wherever. Although I live really close to one of them.
I was about to pick. I was and I was like, oh,
no, go ahead.
Sydney, you went next. You get to pick.
Really?
You pick.
You're new. So
Anne started. She picked hers. No, it's yours.
Now that I feel guilty about, like, I'll take Gibson Neck.
Okay.
And Suzanne, do you want Skyline?
Well, I live really close, unless Harlan wants it, but I'm thinking Harlan's waiting to be the number 5.
Yeah, I'm like, I bet you he's going to say I don't have time for this.
Yeah, I'll do Skyline.
And I can do Liberty.
Perfect. Okay, thank you. That's all we need for now, and I'll reach out and share.
You're lucky we like you, Harlan.
Need to do.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for sharing that, and we'll make sure that then. I'm glad you're going first. That's for sure. Anything else under calendar and future agenda topics? Okay, with not seeing anything else, anything for the good of the order, we will go ahead. We are adjourning into executive session, although I am taking a 5-minute break because this executive session was supposed to start 2 hours ago and I haven't even had dinner yet. So we will come back into executive session at 10:20.
Wait, Marnie, do we have to go into a separate room or something?
That's what I was going to ask.
Yes.
Me too.
Yeah.
Should we go into the room first?
Yes, let's go into, well, did Harlan just go away? Yeah, let's go into the.
He's there, isn't he?
Okay.
Yeah, he's there.
Oh, I did something fancy. I only see people whose cameras are on. That way I can catch people who turn their camera on that aren't supposed to be on. Yeah, so if we can go into the breakout room first, and then we will break for 5 minutes.
Okay, I'm not.
Is that set up?
So Steven's going to be sending us away when he gets it set up.
Yeah, I have to make the room first. I didn't know you guys were going into executive.
Well, then why don't we give you 5 minutes and then we'll break out into the rooms.
Well, let's just take a break, and when we come back, we'll see where we are.
That's what I meant. Yeah, just send us wherever, Stephen. We'll be back in 5 minutes.
I'll be here.
Okay, thanks.
Stephen.
Meet of you.
Stephen.
Yes.
You see Curtis Leonard there? He also needs to go into the breakout room.
Okay. Here, I can stop recording now, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Perfect.
You can put Natalie in there.